No, for all the witnesses I contacted.
Oh, yeah, 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 I got you. I'll email it to you.
Thanks, brother.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Midway through the day.
Wow, that seems to be going around. Our printer overheated.
It overheated?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I can't print none of the stuff I usually print out for them. And then I sent out the wrong agenda. I said one case should be drawn. Not drawn, that fixed that. Yeah.
Wow. Preliminary budget overview.
And then Julie, she said she's feeling sick, but I gotta be at City Hall tomorrow. So she's like, oh, like, gotta find someone to cover tomorrow.
So who is that? Maddie or?
Usually me,
Oh.
but I gotta present tomorrow for the reallocation of the Hyatt funds. So if we don't find anybody, because everybody usually got at least a day notice, because everybody covers their own sentence.
Yeah.
So worst case scenario, exactly. I hope all gets fine. Oh, yeah, what's, what do you?
I think number 13, accessory dwelling. Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
It's letting you know.
Let's try to rearrange that. I think on the already down the agendas.
Yeah, two that open file, so you got. What is the, depends on y'all. What is it?
That's the wild card.
That's why I have to do is bet, man.
That's why I was like,
Well, that's, we have no idea too.
Yeah, it makes it a fun bet then, right?
Well, we don't like betting on it because of course, at least the two joint cases come from, it's always not like that. There's no cases in the universe.
I guess.
The email was there.
Uh, 13.
All I'm saying is like, you know, maybe.
It might not flash out.
No, this is super process.
Yeah, I was saying, I was in the meeting, there was no. That's.
It's a hot water for us to. Say what they make me say already. It's.
What's your name?
Cameron.
Cameron, I'm last, nice to meet you. Right.
Yeah. No, that's not on my radar. Yeah.
Did you see? No, we got an email today.
Oh, did he do things? Yeah. He did leave the room, so he might have.
Pre-project. Sometime with, super excited.
This is yours. That's your, yeah. I really like your commercial. I was like, hey, I know her.
Well, I'm from St. Louis as well.
waiting on the internet to work because you don't have any printed agendas tonight. I need it. My surprise, like, yeah.
So.
I think that's without this.
Cameron, you lied to me, you said 6 was done.
I know, right?
We're gonna go ahead and get started. Apologize for the delay. I was waiting to get in it because we don't have to create agenda. Apologize for you not information. Bear with me to touch. On this meeting to order. This advisory board, it's monthly. It's the first time here, we don't basically an opportunity. It's the first time here, first time watching. So we don't. Council member, as well as here, give feedback to this advisory board members. Yeah, it's a unique apparatus in the city of Wichita, which is a small city, the digital grassroots feedback opportunity. Zoning cases, city things, tonight we're gonna find. That's the budget, something goes the file. Here, speak on any zoning case. They also speak on. Sorry.
Noticing a theme here. Lieutenant Hazard Station 10. Let's see, right now the Citizens Fire Academy is in week 3. It's a unique opportunity for citizens 18 years and older to come out, and about 9 to 10 weeks to see what we do. You get hands-on experience. Get to use all the dispatch, station 1, and JAWS, all the stuff that we do that people don't know we do. We have a recruit academy. Currently, we have 21 recruits on the fire side that have passed their EMT. They're working to become operational firemen. We also recently delivered our wildland class to 40 of our members who will be deployable throughout the state and the region for wildfire season, which is starting to kick off. RTC recently held a Mayday drill that was citywide for multiple companies, trying to help us address how to handle a Mayday in the event that we have one here in town. From March 20th to April 19th, we had 28 fire scenes that were investigated by FIU that totaled $1.87 million in loss. In District 1, we have one that's currently under investigation, 2 that were deemed accidental, 2 that were deemed arson, and 1 that is undetermined. Recently, we have installed the new HOS equipment in all of our apparatus, which lets us know when we're responding. If there's another apparatus arriving, traveling emergency traffic, it has a little indicator in the cab that lets the officer and the driver know, kind of gives us a heads up that we have an apparatus coming our way that we might not be able to see. We also took delivery of our new brush truck. It's going to go to station 22, I believe. It's currently in maintenance, having some light and radios installed. And then we have our new USAR truck which is housed at Station One right now, which is gonna increase our special operations capabilities. It's also gonna be regionally deployable. And then they have started construction on the storage facility down on the south side of town for our support services group. Any questions?
Questions from the DAB? Fire? Any questions from the public to the fire department? All right, thank you for being here and reporting. Appreciate it. Police department online? Always. Police online? Fine. Wichita Police Department.
Hello, I'm having some technical difficulties. My laptop, it was cutting out audio, so I think I've got it on my cell phone up and running, so I apologize.
Gotcha, appreciate it.
Perfect. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Last month, I believe Captain Rakestraw was there and talked about RTM starting across all 4 bureaus. And he specifically probably talked about Patrol North. Patrol East has also started. We're focusing on the Hilltop area with incidents that are involve violent crime and handguns. So we've been doing that since April. It's going really well. We're getting a lot of positive interactions with community members there and really getting out and making a lot of contacts. So I think that's going really well. Did you guys still see me?
We just have your audio.
Okay. I'm trying to pull up my notes. So
You're
that's
there.
probably, I lost you. Patrol North has also been doing their RTM. And I was just talking with Officer Grinley. So they're doing bike patrols. They're working on cleaning up abandoned vehicles. And they're working with other agencies to get the trees cut back so that the streetlights can be seen, which really is benefits a lot of people, especially kids and individuals out walking, and then also lights up houses and residences better so that people are less likely to be walking up to them in the dark. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just leaving a fatality accident out east, so when it rains, it pours, right? Let's see. And then other than that, we've really been working with MAVCD a lot out on Patrol East. We're hitting a few specific areas, trying to get some of these problem locations boarded up and sealed up so that way people aren't inside and doing narcotics and other problematic activities in residential areas. So that's been really helpful. We've been having really good luck and working relationship with our inspectors out east. So that's been great. I know the PAC, which is the Plainview Activity Camp, is getting ready to kick off this summer. So Patrol East officers will be out there and the school interacting with the school age kids and their summer camp and playing activities with them this summer. And then when the camp's over, we always host a little cookout for them at the end. So it's a lot of fun in the summer. We have a lot of good time hanging out with them and doing that experience. So I think that's really about it for Patrol East.
Cameron, were you able, I'd say, we had a discussion at the last meeting about pulling some of the points we had wanted previously discussed with the department in a more formal way. Before the next meeting, could you look back at those notes and we put an agenda item on for next month's meeting to go to make sure we go over that to get something so they know scheduled, because otherwise we're just gonna keep round and around. Is that cool?
You're cutting out really bad. I apologize. Could you repeat that?
There were a number of issues that have come up, like license plate readers, some of the crime stats, things like that. That DAB members wanted to go over in a more concerted way beyond just asking a CPO. It needs to go up the chain where we could have leadership and actually have an agenda, and ideally the chief to come. That was something that was promised to the DAB in this district after he became chief, and it still hasn't happened. And so that's what we're just trying to have.
You're asking that Chief Sullivan appear at the DAB meeting to discuss specific LPR information and crime stats?
Yes, if possible, and if not him, we do need to get a conversation going with someone in command. And if they need to bring someone, analyst specific to the issues that DAB members want to discuss, I think it's especially relevant when it's talking, we heard last month all about building up community engagement and communication. It just seems like this could be a step.
No, I think that sounds great. I will meet with do you know who was Captain Rickstraw there at the last meeting?
That was Captain, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, I will try and reach out to the North CPO officers and figure out what they found out with their captain. And then I'll relay that with my captain out east and see if we can get some answers and somebody a lot smarter than just the CPOs out there to answer those specific questions for you all.
I know y'all are pretty smart. It's more, I know you're in a tough position when asked about a lot of these things. And I appreciate y'all taking the time because this is really to respect all of our time. So we just don't keep
Sure.
going in a.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I try and every time, like I'm taking notes on an email right now, and then whoever has DAB the next month scheduled, I just send it to them so they know what we discussed and then the question you guys are asking. So hopefully they can come prepared. So like I said, I'll reach out and we'll try and get you an answer before the next DAB meeting.
Thanks. Let's get that
Of course.
email. Any questions for, please, from the DAB members or comments?
Yeah, I've got a question. Maybe just clarification. So he said somebody different will be at the next, from the department would be at the next DAB meeting. So what, are we not having continuity? Are they changing the WPD person from month to month?
Sometimes it's north, sometimes it's east, the CPO, correct? That's what you're referencing.
Right. Well, and then there's several of us on a team, so we don't all go to the same meeting every month. So the officers up north take turns on presenting at DAB 1 and DAB 2 and DAB 3, and the same out east. We take turns presenting at the different ones and going out of the way.
The officers
So-
present back
Go ahead.
from the DAB. Is that shared on an email or in some comms way with the other CPOs? So everyone's in the loop?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm taking notes right now, and then I'll look who's scheduled to present at the next DAB meeting and send them the questions they have. So if you guys are asking about traffic stats at 13th and Hillside, I can be like, hey, this was a specific question that came up. Obviously, this one's more broad, specific, and will be addressed to supervisors well above me about them appearing and not. So I'll figure out what Captain Rakestraw had in mind and what the North team had in mind, and then I'll share that with the East team and with my Captain Beard, and we'll go from there.
Appreciate it. I'm sorry, folks, for taking time on this. This is over a year. We've been trying to get this conversation and meeting happen. And I appreciate it. Working with us on this. I would say for this.
Yeah.
I've been on that for nearly a year and a half, a month over a month over a month. We had the same person, right? And then all of a sudden it's switching. And my experience with the police department, Citizens Review Board and so forth, when somebody different each time, the message, it's like playing telephone, right? It's different. And then the information you are looking forward to the next month is not gonna get because of this. So
I understand that, but the officer, I can't even remember who asked me, Stark maybe, but he's on vacation tonight. So obviously he's allowed that vacation time with his family and his personal time that he's earned. So he asked me to fill in for him tonight.
okay, but that doesn't
I
explain.
assume a little before, but I get the point that we had a more consistency for a few months, but I think more importantly than consistency is actual action on this. And so on DAB's responsibilities, what I would say, because it sounds like we will actually have some communication before the next meeting. Cameron, if we can refresh on the topics, the specific topics, I think there were 3 or 4, and then email it out to the DAB. And then if there's any additional specific questions, we'll have maybe like a week to round them up. That then we'll give the WPD a week and a half to get even to know exactly what's going on and come in with some answers ready and some stats ready. Does that sound good?
Right. So, and you guys are still cutting out, and I apologize. I've tried it on 2 different platforms now, but I'm hearing more on my phone. If you do have specific questions that you do want addressed, I think, is that what you were talking about? You're going to email those potentially to me or somebody else before?
Remind you all the topics, like license plate readers. I think there were 3 or 4 that might need some more technical expertise on hand. That's been lacking with some of the stats and discussions we're wanting to be had. And then
Sure.
if there are those, or maybe with outside of those, some pressing questions that have come up since those topics were identified, we'll include those as well. Ideally, time before the meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, because if you guys can get that to me, or, I mean, I'm happy to be the one responsible. So if you can get those questions to me, then I can present those to the captains, to the crime analyst, to the chief. And that way they come to the meeting prepared to discuss the specific points that are of concern, especially since this has been going on for so long. That way they don't just show up and then they don't have the answers you guys want and then have to come back another time and get you those.
Totally, agree. And I appreciate you stepping up to help, run this through everyone. Little bureaucratic mess, but we'll get it figured out before the next meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions, for the Wichita Police from DAP? Any from the public? All right, thank you so much. Thanks so much for being put on the spot there, and I appreciate, we'll be following up in the next week or two.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, officer.
Have a good night.
All right, bye.
Hey everyone, I'm Parker. We're really excited to have two grand reopenings this month. They're going to be for the Westlink and Angelo branches, which just reopened after extensive renovations. The one for Westlink is going to be on May the 10th, and the one for Angelo is going to be on May the 31st. They will each have ribbon cuttings. The one for Westlink is going to be at 9:45, and the one for Angelo is at either 9:45 or 11:30. I will double check and get back to you on that and confirm that information with you. And then at Westlink, we're just going to have crafts, music, and dancing. There will be programs up until 5 o'clock. And then at Angelo, we will have science, technology, plants, and poetry. We will have Roy Moy III give a science concert in the morning, and then we'll have Future Maker Labs. They'll be showing off Astra, the robot dog, and then running through engineering, all ages. And then we'll have Renata's Plant Bus. And we'll have an after hours performance brought to you by Ponder This. Live poetry around the theme of self-expression. It's going to run from 6:30 to 7:30. On the 10th, we're also going to have a community art project led by Melissa Young. At the Angelo branch. It's a come and go event, so we invite families to come in and make a little piece of Angelo theirs. And we are also getting ready to gear up for the summer reading program. We're going to come out with catalogs and reading logs and calendars on May the 22nd, and the program lasts until June the 26th. If you turn in your logs, you get entered in for a grand prize drawing, and you also have a chance to win prizes, books, that sort of thing. And one more thing I would like to tell you about is on the 23rd, from 2:30 to 4, we're going to have a panel discussion. It's going to be community conversation on gun violence and community healing. I will be moderating. And we want to have this discussion to connect people to leadership resources. Council member Brandon Johnson and Joseph Shepherd are going to be on the panel. And we also want to hold space for people to share their experiences of trauma about gun violence and explore together what community healing can look like. And that's all I have.
Any questions? The library.
May 23rd, which library?
Oh, it's actually gonna be right here
Oh,
in this
here.
very room at
Okay.
the
So
Atwater
it's-
Neighborhood Resource Center.
It's a Friday, 2:30 to 4.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can you remind me again when that East Branch is reopening that just closed down for remodeling?
Rockwell?
Yes.
Okay, so offhand, September, October.
Who's sponsoring that community conversation? What organization?
It's the library. It's brought to you by the library. It was my original idea. I'll go into a bit of backstory. I participated in the Unity in the Community March this past May, and it was very inspiring, and I'm grateful to you and to the Greater Wichita Ministerial League for modeling collective action. And I asked myself how the library could help support forward momentum on community engagement around this issue. And so this was my original idea.
Comment for library. Thank you for providing a very nice detailed report as well as the board meeting notes for the DAB members look over. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments for the library from the public? All right, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we won't have,
Yeah, he caught the flu today.
okay, that's all. All right, without any opposition, we'll receive and file and move on to the scheduled agenda item, preliminary budget overview.
Interesting.
Need help?
No, I think I could do it. Let's see. There's some handouts for everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Elizabeth Gentry and I work in the finance department in the budget office. And I'm here tonight providing you all an update on the budget process. And is there a way for me to control the slides from here or not? All right, and I have a helper this evening.
I got
So if this is your first exposure to the budget process so far this year and you want to learn more, there have been 3 budget workshops so far, and those can all be found on the City of Wichita YouTube channel. Those were on January 28th, February 25th, and April 22nd. So what I'll be covering tonight is results from the community survey that were presented. If you want to know more, those were presented at the January workshop. An overview on the operating budget, the CIP, and then resident engagement. And this QR code here can take you to the budget website where there's a calendar and so forth. But I would highly recommend against downloading any budget documents on your phone because we have them in chapters, but community survey results. So a random sample of Wichita households completed the survey last fall. We've been doing that every other year in the past, and we started doing it every year. And I'll provide you with a brief overview of the results. So, whoops, you go back a slide, I'm sorry. Woo. There we go. So the 2024 survey compared to the 2023 surveys showed some good results overall. 85 of the items received similar ratings to the prior year, and 22 received higher ratings than the prior year, and just 3 received lower ratings than the prior year. So, and there's far more information online if you're interested. In addition to asking people to rate services, we also ask survey respondents what they think the City of Wichita should be focusing on in the next 2 years. So these are the things that bubble to the top based on what people think are essential or very important to focus on in the next 2 years. So it's consistent with the feedback that we hear. Drinking water for the water treatment plant is in the commissioning process and drought. So I think that's top of mind. Crime prevention, as you heard, the library is having an event soon. Affordable housing and homelessness services were things that were asked in the survey for the very first time. And then fire and police and street repair, which are 3 of the biggest items when it comes to the general fund. Then we take that feedback, so people's rating of services and then also their rating of importance, and we graph it on this matrix. So from left to right, things that are farther to the right are items that are higher importance and kind of tied to that graph you saw before. And then from bottom to top is the service rating. So things at the bottom of this survey, residents rated as having rated less positively when it comes to the service, and things for the top, they rated more positively. So a lot of the focus last year and this year will be in that, what we call the magenta quadrant. You noticed when I got to work that dressed for it. But I do that a lot, so I guess it's a good thing. A lot of focus, affordable housing and homelessness services, those are things, as I said, this is a benchmarking survey, so we ask the same questions year after year, but those are things that we've heard a lot
The city of Wichita has received a lot of feedback from the community, and we directed a lot of our ARPA funding to those two things, and they are very high important, low quality items in the survey. Crime prevention is in about the same spot as last year. Street repair is as important as it was last year, but moved up in its quality rating. So that is, the mayor has one of these that she carries from place to place. But I haven't done that. So next one. So putting this all together. So at the city council workshop in February, there was a big focus. If you're interested in strategic planning, go find the February workshop if that's your thing. So I'm kind of taking this in order. There was a lot of focus on strategic planning to connect resident priorities from the survey back to the budget process, which is easier said than done. And I'm going to be, I'll provide you a quick update on that process. So the city of Wichita has 5 pillars that capture our work, such as keeping Wichita safe and living well. And so what we're doing differently this time is instead of goals that are set at a department level, this budget will have 23 goals that transcend departments, that are cut across these departments. And so I'll introduce you to 3 of those. And then underneath those goals, there's a total of 46 strategies. And nearly all of them require cross-departmental effort to implement. This one. So this is just I'm going to introduce you to 3 of the strategies. So first, under this pillar of Keep Wichita Safe, there's a goal. This goal is related to the underlying causes of crime, which of course crosses departments. And there was a presentation, I believe, last August at the city council meeting about crime prevention strategies that cross departments. This particular tactic, the particular strategy under this one related to behavioral health and substance abuse is one that was actually addressed at the en banc meeting last Tuesday. There's a meeting between Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita regarding the spending of opioid settlement funds, as well as liquor tax funds. So there's a lot of different parties involved in addressing this strategy. And so it's just an example to share with you. The next one is in the growing our economy pillar. That goal is to encourage an abundant range of housing, like crime prevention. This requires a broad cast of characters. And if you remember, also like crime prevention, affordable housing is in the magenta, so the low high importance, lower satisfaction quadrant of the survey. And a cross-departmental team will continue to work on this effort. And something coming along the bend related to this is that next Tuesday, 13th, the city council, I think, as it's scheduled right now, will consider a recommendation for the transfer of 47 housing units that were part of the Wichita Housing Authority to partners in the community to rehab those back into the housing.
Is this the outgrowth of the land trust?
It doesn't have anything to do with the land bank actually, but it does have a lot to do with ARPA. If you're like, if you have the, you have like a bingo card of things we've been working on. So.
Excuse me, you said it has a lot to do with what?
ARPA?
Oh,
yeah,
there's
ARPA.
still ARPA funding?
Yeah, so there's ARPA funding involved. So these were, these 53 housing units were part of this RAD conversion. And these 53 single family units weren't part of that. So we used $3.6 million in ARPA funding for the city of Wichita to purchase them from the housing authority, which is a little tricky. So now the city of Wichita is going to be, they received this RFP for 47.
What organizations did those homes go to? Did you know?
I don't remember. It's just, I know that they want to get it done on the 13th, but I can't remember. I'm more like on where does the dollars go part of it.
Sorry.
But I know they had a lot of interested proposers and it sounds like they're moving quickly, and that's a relief to see, because I know there's just also been concerns about the housing fitting you know, as with the affordable housing shortage. So when they told me we're moving this fast, I'm like, well, good for you. That's terrific. So that's moving ahead. And then under the next slide there, Cameron. Okay, under living well, this one is related to emergency sheltering and wraparound services. To work upstream to prevent homelessness, to make homelessness rare and brief. And so just like the other two items, this requires a lot of effort across departments and then across agencies. And I know that the city of Wichita has been a partnership on, there's been a task force, and we've funded that with some of our opioid settlement funds, and they're in a very active group and have really worked together on how to move forward. Next one. So just so the budget book, which you can locate at all of our public library locations, it's more than a financial plan. You'll notice from what I'm telling you, it's also a strategic plan. So in addition to this work that's related to the pillars and goals, we've also been working on research topics that came out of the budget adoption last August. And then we're also working on cost recovery efforts across departments. Then working with departments on getting so that's the update on strategic planning. So that really gets you, we'll move into the operating budget. So I mentioned already there have been 3 workshops, and we're still, you know, I feel like we're in the middle of the story when it comes to budget adoption. We started with the survey and we'll end with printing the proposed budget. I'm sharing these projections with you to show where we are in the process. But obviously, the environment in which we operate is continues to change. So things can change, even though we're really we'll go to print in mid-July, but things can still change from early May to mid-July. So the first one here, and like I mentioned before, in those things where residents said were their most important services, I just always like to point out that police, fire, and public works are the 3 largest departments that are funded by the general fund. The city of Wichita, of course, has about 34 more funds than the general fund, but the general fund is the one that gets the most focus because of the services that it provides, and also because the competition for general fund resources. So it's the importance of the service, the competition, is why there's always so much focus on the general fund. About 75% of the general fund is for salaries and benefits. The services that are provided by general fund departments are very service intensive. So any changes in wages or benefits or position vacancy rates can have an outsized impact on the general fund. Just some context. I get this since some of you have been through this year after year, but it hasn't changed. So just putting together our financial plan, before we move on to the simulator, I'll provide you some updates, but the community priorities really have been guiding budgeting this year. I feel like it's been an interesting 5 years in budgeting, and so this has just been a real good year to take a breath and look at community priorities and really layer those in, or do we have a really intentional way. But since it wouldn't be a presentation without tables and numbers, here we are. So next slide. So this is our baseline general fund forecast that was presented on April 22nd. So of course things can change. At this point, we're anticipating a balanced budget for 2025, and then a deficit of $1 million of 2026, and then a deficit of about $5.5 million in 2027. If you've been through these presentations before, you'll notice this is a typical pattern simply because our wages generally grow. We forecast wages to grow at a faster rate than our revenues tend to grow. That transfer in from the stabilization reserve of $3 million each year was something that was included in the 2025 adopted budget, and we're continuing to model it in that way. And the next one, so I covered these, but forecasting risks, position vacancy rates, economic conditions, Property tax growth rates is another one. We'll receive that notice from the county in mid-June. Things could change, and it's always an interesting email to open. It's just like, because it can go either way. And I've worked in the budget office a long time, not long enough time I've seen that. And then higher than expected labor rates in 2026 and 2027. When we initially, the workshop in February had our first financial forecast, and at that point, the word was that inflation was slowing, and the soft landing was successful, but there seems to be some signs that the Fed won't be cutting interest rates in the near term, and that puts some pressure on inflation, and inflationary pressure places pressure on wages. So it's just something to be mindful of. So our next forecast is a modified growth forecast. And so during the legislative session this year, there was a proposal to cap growth from property valuation reappraisal while capturing all growth from new construction. This legislation went around and around. It didn't get finalized this year, but what the budget office and alternative budget office was asked to model was a model where all growth from new construction would be in the model, but only growth from reappraisal that matches CPI would be in the model. Part, just as a person who gets these notices from the county, part of the challenge of this item is that new construction by the county often seems a lot lower than expected. And I think there are also cases where there will be complete renovations of buildings, like in downtown Wichita, and that shows up as being reappraisal rather than new construction. So that's a challenge that's particular to Wichita, is there's a lot of renovation and work that's going on in existing buildings. It's just to caveat. That is an update on the operating budget for you. And then last is, well, no, not last, but next, close. I'm trying to move quickly. On the capital improvement program. So it is, for those of you who are new to the CIP, it is our 10-year program for infrastructure investments, and we update it annually. Next one, pie chart of the funding sources of the CIP. So just like in the general fund, there's a lot of competition in the general fund, and we talk about that and not the other 30-something funds. In the CIP, most of the action that we talk about is in that GO at-large funding slice. But you'll notice water and sewer, those are big slices of the CIP. They're very capital-intensive activities. There's also a large slice for local sales tax. That's for streets and bridges and freeways. But GO at-large, general obligation at-large, is the part that gets the most discussion. And the next slide. And again, this one shows you how the projects are, this is the funding by project. And so it shows it by project type. And so the GO funding is heavily concentrated in heavy equipment. So that's replacing our big dump trucks. Public facilities, so that includes city hall, libraries, mostly renovation and maintenance work. And then public safety, which includes police stations and fire stations, as well. A big ticket item in the CIP is replacement of fire apparatus. When we develop the CIP, the first thing that it's based on is a community investments plan, which is the comp plan for Wichita and Sedgwick County. And the goal for that is to maintain, the top priority is to maintain what we have, how it's set. We also align it to city council goals and pillars. And then the asset managers, particularly in public works, bring to us what are priorities for the CIP. A really good example of that is if there's a biennial bridge inspection program, and they inspect bridges and they will come back to us. And we've had 2 in the last few years that have moved up in priority in the CIP due to deteriorating condition. The First Street Bridge, and then the one that was just replaced. So that's what they tell us to do, to prioritize maintenance. And we get all these projects and we put them in, and this table is based on projects that were in the CIP as of April 22nd. So as of that date, nearly 2/3 of GEO at-large projects were for maintenance. On LST, it was about half of them, and so that would mostly be street maintenance. And then other would be airport water, sewer, stormwater, etc. So we definitely are prioritizing maintenance projects in CIP. Good news. So next steps when it comes to the budget. Obviously, the budget office is going to be continuing to monitor revenue data. We're working on putting all the strategic planning information together across divisions and departments. But the fun part is we are moving. Tonight is the day, this is the day that we move into the resident engagement phase of the budget process formally. And we are launching the budget simulator. And then I think tentatively having a social media town hall with graduates of the Civic Engagement Academy later on in the summer. So, oh, this one. So if you like workshops, we have one on May 27th, right after Memorial Day. And then after we get the assessed valuation notice, we'll have a workshop on June 24th. And that's not something we've typically done in the past. But the city council, there's been an interest in providing varied models for the budget. And so we felt that that could be one of the better ways to introduce that topic. So it wasn't such a long wait between May and budget being printed. On the next slide, the budget will be proposed on July 15th this year. If you can't get to City Hall during the day, but you'd still like to come in person and provide feedback, the evening meeting will be on August 7th. And then we'll have 2 more daytime meetings, and the budget will be adopted on August 26th this year. Are we ready? So here is the budget simulators live. Made it go live right before I left my office. So if you're interested, there's a QR code here, and there is a link. I also have some handouts for you. Have some, well, 2 things. I should have mentioned this earlier. This I bring to you, this is, people often ask how much of the general fund tax support there is for different services. Because some services like park, for example, they have charges for services. So that's what this is. So it kind of gives you a, it's in the budget, but it's in the back. It's a big document. And then this is, I would call it a palm card. I think it's called a rat card, and it has the QR code. So if you have the QR code from today, you don't need it, but you can share it. So, and if everything works with the budget simulator, it will be promoted on our social media accounts tomorrow. So if you want to give that a try, you click on the link and let's see what happens. Uh-oh. It's probably like a right click. So while he's doing that, just some basic tips on the budget simulator. We have it arranged like last year, where the different groupings are arranged by the quadrants on the survey. And so there's some things that are higher importance that you can increase and decrease. There's some items that are lower importance that you can only decrease. Okay, so if you go down, so here's the quadrants for you. And then there's some pie charts that look better than the ones that I usually make. Voila. And if you go down, let's start it. And so you can increase and decrease. So on this I thing here, you can see more about the service, and then you can increase and decrease them. And then there's also on just some of them there, you can click on the more link and find out more. We have about a budget that's $1 million out of balance here, which is what we showed to the city council on April 22nd, and that shouldn't be too difficult to balance $1 million on a $300 million budget. But I know I always get a lot of feedback, but I really wanted to increase everything. I didn't want to decrease anything. This is really difficult. Yes, I know. This is my work, right? But I encourage you and other people you know to stay the course and submit a budget. And then there's a comments field at the end. And it's really insightful and it's really interesting. It's almost like its own conversation that's happening at the end. So there's these 4 areas. And as you know from that handout, some of our departments and services cost more than others. So if you think you're going to balance the budget by decreasing economic development and code enforcement and you'll be done, unfortunately, these are really small services. And then the other feedback I get is I want to get rid of an entire department. And I don't think, we try to make the simulator be as realistic as possible for the budget discussions that we typically have. And that's not anything that we've ever heard during the budget process. So just and I've heard of communities where people were allowed to do that, and then the city council said we would never get rid of it, and then it led to lots of hurricanes. So we try to make it as realistic as possible. So that's the budget. And yeah, it's an ongoing, we do our best, and we love your feedback and love to hear you get engaged. And there's lots of opportunities, whether it's going to the library or downloading the budget document or watching a YouTube. That's the story.
Clarify the budget shortfall. I've seen some larger numbers mentioned in the past in the news. So it is just $1 million for the 2026.
Yes, it's currently $1 million. So it depends on which way you slice it. So it's $1 million short, but you remember the idea is to transfer in $3 million from the stabilization reserve to the general fund in 2026. We had a number of years where we transferred out a year into the stabilization reserve due to vacancies. So so it depends. So some people say 4, some people say 1. It continues to change. If you don't like the 1 million, tune in on May. It'll probably be a different number. Things have just been very, very fluid.
I guess speaking of the fluid, that 1 million numbers are already included, and I would love to know the specific numbers that Leighton was referring to. I read that he was interested in slash the finance department or some cuts slashes. Well, because it's increased it's increased more so than any other department. And I'm curious as I'm trying to understand why it's taking up 214 million versus the police at 130, and the police increase was 7% since 2020.
14 million for the finance
Well,
department.
I just pulled it was on the website just now.
Okay, well, so I see here. So the finance department is 214 million on page 170 of the budget, but the vast majority of that is not in the general fund. 123 million of that is in the pension fund, which is a trust fund that pays pension payments. And then another 82 million is in our risk management fund. And that we're self-insured, so that includes all of our health insurance payments to all of our health insurance, work comp, tort, all of it. So the general fund part of the finance, because I'm like, I don't think I work in that department. The general fund part of the finance department is about 8 million. There probably is some room there for.
I just thought it was
Just like
interesting that
any department.
Leighton pointed it out as a specific one to go after, and I was curious what savings he was looking at, software elimination.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I mean, just we've had some natural understanding in the finance. It's really technical, but I'm here and yes. We've had some natural understanding in the finance department related to technology. One of the areas is mail. We pay the finance department employees have the mail room. We contract out mail. We just mail a lot less than we used to, and we kept the budget the same, thinking, well, maybe this will be the year we'll need to mail lots of things and we'll have problems, but it just keeps going down. Printing has gone down. But then on the other side of our process, just things that are technology related. But we keep on thinking, well, we don't want to be short at year in mail, but I don't think that's ever, and the rates keep on going up, but I don't think we mail much, and it's for the whole organization. So we just, I guess, I just don't mail like we used to.
I'm just trying to find some low hanging fruit.
That's the number, yeah, but things like that, but we're always, you're always worried, oh no, what if, and the other thing too, just working in the finance department, we seem to just be so wall to wall with work that we do all of our training online anymore. So we just haven't spent as much, we are still getting trained, we're still getting our CPEs, but we're doing it online or locally.
As far as then feedback, the ideal time, let's say DAB members go back, do some more research on some of this in the simulator. I know you have the August dates. What would be the ideal time if like the DAB wanted to revisit this?
Yeah, well, the simulator is open until August, and then we have the workshop in May. I would guess maybe coming back and maybe talking about it in June.
Okay.
You all.
Just even just a little, like a line on, make sure. you have any
Yeah,
questions.
just what did you learn? What are you interested in?
Let's do that again.
I joke because there was a year where I did multiple DAB meetings on one night, and I showed up and the DAB member the city council member had already made the entire presentation, and it just said we have questions they couldn't answer. So I have no doubt that the council member could very much facilitate that discussion, probably answer any questions after year 8 on the city council. Happy to field them.
Yeah, initial budget questions from DAB members.
Yeah.
The state.
The ARPA funds were gone away. We still have a bucket?
No, well, our bucket's already labeled. Does that make sense? So everything needed to be. Yeah, it wasn't committed, but now I can't think of the name. Everything was in a PO at the end of the year, encumbered by the end of December. So everything has been spoken for, but not all of it has been expended. So we still have about 21 million more that we need to expend between now and whenever it ends.
So does the city have the authority to recommit those funds, or they're locked in?
No, the deadline was December 31st, 2024 per the appropriation. So there's no flexibility.
And are those funds in the bank, or?
Yeah, we received the funds in 2 tranches in 2021 and 2022. So all good questions, but Treasury has a really aggressive recruitment process in place for people who aren't doing it correctly. And we've heard that the deadline for final expenditure might be moving up about 15 months. So that's been something else I've been. Just want to make sure that everything.
So we knew the city was going to buy those houses from HUD.
It's something, yeah, I think that I think we started working, there was a round 1, it was, I think, about 33 units for about 1.3 million. And so those groups, I want to say agencies, but some were private and some were nonprofit, they purchased the funding, and then the city, there were ARPA funds that were used for rehab. But what they discovered in round 1 is that round 2 wouldn't be done soon enough to meet the deadline. So now it's kind of an inside out process. So we changed the process, we changed the order of it, and we worked on all the compliance and everything, rest assured, to be able to leverage the funds, because one of the priorities, I came to all the DAB meetings May or June of 2021 about ARPA priorities, and what I heard at the time was affordable housing, workforce development, and small business development. And so the $5 million was set aside from the outset for affordable housing to do it. So,
One last question on the
you
house.
bet.
So did any of those houses get sold in the public market? I know that was the
Yeah.
goal at first.
So I think there are far more of these single family scattered units than these 33 that were rehabbed, 53 that were purchased. I think there were even more. And I think that some of them that were more these are at least kind of in groups. They're not next door neighbors, but they're near each other. So there was a more strategic element of them being in the same program. But then there are other houses that are quite scattered, like they might be the only one in a neighborhood. And I think those were sold individually, but I could be wrong. But it's a lot. I think that's what's happened. Yeah. Thank you. I feel like I stay at a Holiday Express. Sometimes, if you know that ad campaign. So it's been busy. Thank you. Anything else tonight?
Yeah, so
Yes.
the stabilization reserves, that will
Yes.
have to be voted on by the city council as well, right? So the recommendation from the finance team is earmark the 3 million from the reserves to shift it over to the
Yeah.
general to offset.
Yeah, that's already budgeted for 2026.
Okay.
So that's budgeted in 2026, but yes, it would need to be, so in the 2025 budget, the plan is to do it in 2026, so when the budget would be adopted for 2026 in August, that would be appropriated.
So there is a chance that city council members may not agree with that much being moved over from the stabilization.
Could be, yeah,
Okay.
anything is yes, or it could be, yes.
How much is in stabilization fund?
No,
Cause y'all were talking about 3 million for the next potentially 3 years, right?
I think so. Yeah, so at the end of 2023, there was 32 million. And then there's another transfer in that's occurring in as we close 2024. Remember off the top of my head what it is? It's in the single digits. Like, there's another transfer in. So we've modeled it. It would, with these 3 one-time transfers out of 3 million, it still is within the requirements of our reserve policy. So.
On the budget simulator, I thought that you presented at city on the quadrant. And I believe that you may have had some data that kind of showcased the resident zip code or how many people from each area maybe completed the simulator or
We aren't able to ask that sort of information. I think that it might be at the end, but yeah, it's very.
Okay, so so I just want to affirm that there's no way to say this zip code or this particular geographic area of Wichita, while overall the priorities are this, by
Okay,
zip code or by neighborhood, they actually ranked it completely opposite.
Yeah, no, in the simulator, it's, come and join in the simulator and give it overall. In the community survey, absolutely. You can go on our website and it has information by subgroups.
Perfect.
So what you need to make sure though is that there are quite a few items that there aren't statistical differences between subgroups. One that I know off the top of my head that always sticks out to me is Wichita as a place to work is very highly rated by people who are past working age, but not highly rated by people who are working age. So yeah, I
That
guess
tells the story though, right?
it does tell the story. And yes, I guess
They
you
don't have
look
time
back
to take
on
the survey.
or you look back fondly on working when you don't have to work anymore. So, but there are some differences in between groups. But make sure that when you look, it's not just the numbers, but you have to make sure it's statistically significant.
So the sample size,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, because once you slice it into different, men versus women, those are 2 big groups. But when you look by council district, you're dividing by 6. And so the differences have to be pretty large for there to be a statistically significant difference between those groups. And the data is weighted too. So we know that it's harder to get younger people to reply to the survey, for example. So whereas my demographic loves to fill out surveys, so they get that information.
We need to.
Yeah, women of a certain age are like, you're asking me for my feedback? Oh, of course. So anyhow, it's all good, but it is interesting.
Question from the floor.
Well,
We're gonna finish up with the DAB and then we'll open it fully up to the public. That's how it's, DAB, yes.
okay, a few questions, bear with me, I'll start with the simple ones first. So these budget workshops, these are city council workshops, right?
Yes.
Okay, and just a comment, I mean, it's great and people can have their 5 minutes or whatever, but it's really kind of less than satisfying because if somebody has questions, you don't always get the answers. So I appreciate that there's the opportunity, but a little more back and forth would be appreciated, and
You
that
mean-
may be.
With the city council or?
Right, well, I mean, it's not at a city council meeting, it's a city council workshop, right? We have to follow the city council rules. And you get your 5 minutes of comments. But a lot of times, when I've had questions, I don't always get answers. Where if you've done some others where it's a little more back and forth dialogue with like you or other folks who are able to answer rather than cancel.
Yeah, and I think we have some social media town hall concepts or more, I think there's some things in the website.
Okay, that would be great. And then if I wanted my can I pick up my own copy of the budget or I just have to go to the library and look at it?
They have, or online.
I'm, but like if I want a hard.
We used to, this kind of goes back to the mail and printing. We used to sell them downstairs in the express office and then we had no takers. So we don't have.
Well, I got one, I guess,
It was probably a surplus, like a proposed budget. It was
right.
I don't think that we want, there are years where the proposed budget and the adopted budget are so similar, we don't feel uncomfortable circulating the proposed budget, but this year was not one of them. There were a lot of changes between.
Right, but then that kind of, well, I guess I'll put that together. What items of financial nature within the city that are not published in the budget?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, what financial items of a financial nature in the city, or maybe I should ask it differently. Where could somebody find these items within the budget? Like what the city makes on asset seizure and forfeiture. What it costs the city to defend and settle lawsuits. You know, where do I find that in the budget? And if it's not there,
Yeah, that would be the short management sub-fund of the special insurance fund.
so what is there, and is it broke out, like how much is for defending lawsuits and settling lawsuits, or actually the dollar amount the city
Yeah,
gets for
and
asset forfeiture?
We
and seizure?
use the same chart of accounts for all of our accounts.
Okay.
So those are on the left side. So those go from wages to transfers out at the bottom. So those would be in different characters. They're probably, I think legal services would be in professional services.
So, but it's to break out, it's possible then to break out, if I wanted to see exactly what the city pays in defense costs for lawsuits, I could.
No,
I
yeah,
can't.
there's not we even got from our budget reviewers, your budget book's too long. If we went into that much detail on every item in the budget book, it would just go on and on. But there is a sub-fund of the self-insurance fund that is for it's called, it is the sub-fund 624 as a division for civil litigation.
Okay, terrific.
To be those costs.
Let's see, and then you said maintenance is prioritized in CIP. Now deferred maintenance, I don't know, is there a plan to get caught up on that? That might not be in CIP, but I know deferred maintenance keeps coming up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, and we categorize maintenance as maintenance.
Okay.
You know, not it. So, and yes, there are some items, especially related. We have a lot of different asset classes, streets, buildings, water, sewer, and so we have a number of performance measures related to, the value of the assets or the amount of, deferred maintenance and whatnot. So, of course, there are performance. So, and I think there's also items in the ACFR that are related to the value.
Into performance measures, and this will be my last question. One of my frustrations in the past, and that we've had a little bit of a conversation about it, was that they were more benchmarks and not really key performance indicators when it comes to meeting goals. I understood that there's
Do not fear.
okay, that there's a pathway to getting there.
The Twyla plan is underway. No, we are working on that right now, related to these goals, you know, the pillars, the
Yes.
goals, the strategies, and then the next step, there's a groups of people working on the strategies cross-departmentally and so forth, but then also measuring how progress to those things.
I bow to you then. Thank you.
Well, it's not just me, but it really was a chicken and an egg. Where are we measuring, where are we going?
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So like the one about homelessness, making homelessness rare and brief. I'm sure that people within a homelessness information system know what that means to track that. And so that would be an example of a key metric. So, yes, it's a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for
You're
being patient
welcome.
with us. Are there any other questions from Dab or comments before we move to the public? Members of the public, it's open to y'all. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Very simple question. Absolute number of responses you got from the citizen
Survey.
survey.
Yeah.
It goes along with Joseph's.
There were 461 completed.
461
So
out
that
of a
provides,
population of,
and so that provides you a margin of error of 4.6 percentage points.
what's the percentage of the population?
So it was of the population.
Of the population, of the eligible respondents?
Yeah, we sent it out to 5,000 randomly selected households. What it was sent to.
So it's simple math, it's less than around 1% or 2%.
Yeah, and unfortunately, yes, of all the 5,000 households that received it, 461
So
sent
it's
it out.
roughly that.
Yep, so it's within a margin of error. of
And we don't know where those came from, because we don't know where they were sent, is that
No,
correct?
we absolutely know what districts they were sent to. Yeah, and so that's what I was telling Joseph about you can see the demographic subgroups and the information online and the statistical.
It's online. Okay,
Okay, so I'm way out of my depth, so you'll have to help me here. So from what I understand from Project Hope, addressing homelessness is also a crime prevention project for the city. So have there been conversations about reapportioning funds to increase funds for homeless services, like expanding the hot tea or things like that?
No, that's just in generally speaking, I think that that's a lot of what the priorities in the survey and these goals and strategies are related to. It's like on one side, it's we're working toward balancing the budget, keeping up with the revenue projections and what have you. But the other part of the work related to strategies and outcomes is looking and saying, where are there things that we have gaps? Or where are there best practices, evidence-based strategies where maybe we're relying on a different partner to fund those strategies, or we would be waiting forever. So budgeting, it's balancing the budget, but there's also an element of reallocation to it as well. And I feel like we haven't really scratched the surface when it comes to the opioid settlement funding. That distribution started around around the same time as ARPA, and so I'm really excited to see council moving ahead on strategies for that, because I think that you feel like you don't understand the budget. There's a lot I don't understand about all the services we provide, but it seems like there's a lot of overlap between the needs that people have who are facing these challenges. So that might be a good source of funding in some cases. So, and then the sale of the housing units is pretty remarkable. And then we're spending a lot on renovation for building out the MAC, and then also $5 million over 2 years to get the MAC started operation. So, been a lot. Big challenge. You're welcome.
That's fine.
I saw there was a category for public transportation, which was buses and transit. Is paratransit included in that?
That's the challenge with this.
It's so hard to figure that out.
Yeah, the questions are general, so that was inclusive of both. And so these questions, we ask them year after year, so it's important that they're standardized from year after year. We also ask the same questions that other communities are asking, so that we can see how we compare to other communities. For example, library and fire services always are at the top of the heap in every community. So they're typically in the high 70s and 80s and 90s. Whereas there's some other services that cities provide that are just tough. And so it's not unusual. I think our planning department is in the mid-30s for people rating it as excellent or good, and that's actually pretty typical for planning. So it's good for us to ask the same questions year after year.
So is paratransit, which is my lifeline.
Yes, I see.
Considered in the bus transfer, it is, because I couldn't figure out whether it was a federally funded
Yeah, it's
thing.
it's
No.
both too. Yes, it receives federal funding and local funding. It receives both, and I'm actually presenting at the Transit Advisory Board at their next meeting in May. Can't remember when that is. Maybe May 21st. Maybe. I'll be there.
Okay.
If you're interested.
I'm very curious. I'll have to.
You have to get.
Yes.
Yes, but and I think it's online as well.
Okay.
So I've been invited to speak at that one.
Which transit systems are funded for paratransit? Which transit systems in the area are funded for paratransit?
Well, we provide complimentary paratransit service within, there's a guideline within so many miles, with a certain distance of a transit stop. And then we also provide pass-through funding to other agencies.
So there are other agencies that provide the majority of that service.
No, Wichita Transit provides most of the transit in our region, but we pass it through to some other agencies like Derby, Butler County.
Any other questions or comments from the public?
This was based off of one of the neighbors' commentary. Outside of being able to take this survey online, are there other ways to be able to participate in the survey, particularly for those, I know like for paratransit, right? Some folks are part of the BVI community, and unless they have like the JAWS audio technology embedded into their systems, it may not be easy for them to utilize online. So what other ways can they engage?
You mean with the simulator or the survey?
Both.
Okay. So I would say other things in June, we are doing more resident engagement. It'll be in person and I think online. We have, I think it's called budget questions at wichita.gov, which is our email account. Guess you could email Cameron, email me, let your council member know. I often think a lot of times the most effective way, I mean, I'm available for information, does that make sense? And I can, the budget exists at the library, it exists online and what have you. But if somebody wants to advocate for something, I think that reaching out to their council. That's right.
Yeah, just with paratransit, it's not always easy to get access to physically be there. So that's why.
Yeah, no, and
like the waiting list is extremely long.
Yeah.
So I think that's where some of these questions are stemming from.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. And I ran into that with the paper copy of the survey this year. people will call me and said, I'm homebound and I'm visually impaired and how do I do this? And so I had the survey company, I was like, make me one that anyone can see and then give it to me, and then I mail it to people and they mail it back and we get it taken
Right.
care of.
That's amazing.
Because, and people will say things to me, I'm homebound and I don't go to parks. I'm like, yes, but you use our water. And, you know, you're protected by our police department, you know, it's like, and we'll probably be doing more in the future with some more targeted, non-statistically valid surveys. But for now, that's what we, I know it's never enough, but believe it or not, we're considered a leader when it comes to resident engagement. And I think once you get going, there's just always so many ideas. So we do our best. Thank you. So there's a lot, and it's just good to hear all the voices and all the interest. So you keep us going. I'm so thrilled to be here because I have a baseball game to go to that's around the corner, and I will at least catch a couple innings. So thank you for having me.
Before you leave,
Yes.
the opiate settlement funds, where is that money located and how much is it and how will it be disseminated?
Yeah, it's in the opioid settlement fund. It has its own fund. The state of Kansas required us to do it. It's Fund 222. And we are working on a spending plan for that, based on the en banc meeting. So far, the only thing it's paid for has been, rescue drugs, which I always twist my tongue on, and, consulting services, but there's a lot of potential there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all for caring so much.
If you're here not to speak to a zoning case, and this is the time for off agenda items right now to address the DAB and the council. All right, we're gonna go to DAB updates. Starting with Lynn.
Saturday, May 24th, my nonprofit Communities in Action will be at McAdams Park. We host an annual football, cheer, and dance clinic. K through 8th grade. It's totally free, and it's a way to get young people acclimated to the sports or dance or cheer. And again, it's totally free. Mark your calendars, bring your grandchildren, bring your children.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that, speaking about the transportation system in Wichita, the plan, I think, is posted on Wichita Transit, City Wichita website. I know they did a couple informational sessions. One was most recently at the downtown library, I believe. And I don't know if they made any changes in their budget to increase paratransit. I know that that is such a need in this community. It's something that we've talked about as a DAB in how paratransit is first and foremost backed up. So the wait list can be lengthy, and even to access paratransit, the requirements are very strict. Personally, I feel they're discriminatory for people with disabilities to have to go to a doctor to get something to access public transportation. It's something that I battle, you know, myself personally and professionally accessing paratransit, but I have requested that the City of Wichita Transit Center, I guess, department come and speak. I would be willing to reach out to, I believe, Penny, I think, is, and ask if she'd be willing to get on the agenda. Would that be acceptable? Is that something that I can work on setting up, link up with Cameron? Okay, all right. Yeah. I was gonna let you know I hear you. Yes, great question.
My name is Kaylin Jackson, and right now, summer coming up, there's a lot of summer jobs for youth in our community. One of them being mowing services. That's a really good way for young people to make a lot of good money to do a lot of things. And so an organization that I work with is called Student Startup, and we're hosting a few different boot camps right now to just connect young students with customers for mowing, babysitting, and if they have their own business ideas, just helping them find customers for that. And we also just launched a new website I helped design to put your page and your profile on our website, and people can just go to studentstartup.org and you can type in mowing and you can see all of our different mowers. You can type in babysitting, see all of our different babysitters, read about them, read their recommendations, all that stuff, and click on them and book them like that. So if you have anybody that you know that needs a job as a young student, just tell them to look at Student Startup. So
Yeah, man, your dad number.
I was your last.
Oh, so sorry, so
But,
sorry.
no, what's going on, but no, nothing specific from my end this time.
Just a quick update on the College Hill neighborhood plan. It is scheduled to go toward in front of the planning committee this Thursday. It will be a public hearing if anybody is interested. Let me find the date there. Thursday, May 8th at 10 a.m. and that's at 271 West 3rd Street, north, 2nd floor. So, and then it sounds like that there's probably gonna be questions about that, but it is moving through the process. So the work that the group has done and the community feedback has worked really hard to get into that good plan. It's moving forward.
What's their goal to finish up?
Council is in July. Yeah.
I have more updates, Joseph.
Juneteenth is coming up in June. You can visit CoreWichita.org/Juneteenth to see all of the amazing celebrations that are kicking off, with the first one kicking off on June the 8th. And then there will be several events following that. So again, CoreWichita.org/Juneteenth ICT. You can see all the events on the calendar.
I want to make a push for a reminder that the first Saturday of each month here is the District 1 breakfast. And our council member does a great job of bringing in great programs, a lot of really terrific information. This past Saturday, the Sedgwick County Emergency Management Director, I think she's director, was here. And it was so informative. She had some great handouts. But the takeaway that I wanted to bring up here to community members is that there's a community emergency response team training here in Wichita, June 27th through 29th. It's free. I'm going to sign up, but it looks like it's a great way to learn how you can help your neighbors and help yourself even in a community, in an emergency. So I'd encourage folks, you can get information on the Sedgwick County website under Sedgwick County Emergency Management, or maybe the Community Emergency Response Team if you want to Google that here in Sedgwick County. But it looks like it's going to be really worthwhile. I don't know, has anybody on the DAB done that training before to speak to it? Okay, well, I'll come back and tell you how great it is.
Councilmember updates and announcements.
I'll do something different. Come up to the podium, the hot seat. I will start by saying that I did drop a note sheet, and Twyla picked it up and took some of what I was gonna say. Oh, that's great. It's better coming from you.
Okay.
The District 1 breakfast Saturday was awesome. So Julie Stimson is the director, and she talked through kind of the behind the scenes of what happens in emergency situations. So when the Andover tornado happened and all of those things and what could potentially happen, all the work that really goes in behind the scenes. And Julie was nicer than what I said, but I'll say it again. They have a nice little area for elected officials to stay out of the way while the real folks do all the work. But it was fascinating to see what all they do. Councilmember Hoheisel and I went and toured together. All of the council has went, the Emergency Operations Center, EOC, but just to know everything that they do and how it all works all the way up to declaring a federal emergency is just some information and see the hard work. So it was a great breakfast. I want to encourage everybody to come to our breakfast. Next month will be the MAC board and hot team. So everything going on with homelessness has come up a little bit. They will be here to talk about what's going to go forward with the MAC as it becomes the MAC, as well as our hot team. I am in support of expanding the hot team. Hopefully we can do that at some point. They don't have enough staff. They're all amazing, but they need a lot more help. So that was the first thing. Also, next Saturday, May 10th, from 3 to 6:30, over at East High, the Mayor's Youth Council is hosting this year's first Unity in the Community event. all focused on young folks. So it's a great opportunity for us folks who are young at heart to go learn from the young people about what's going on, concerns around violence and what they're doing, and some suggestions for us. Often you can learn a lot from a young person. We think we know everything, we've been there, but this world for them was a lot different than our world. Most of us did not have social media, I think, there's some younger people here. But we didn't have social media growing up. It was just a floppy disk and trying to find some Walkman stuff.
Yeah.
That was what we had, but it should be a great opportunity to hear from them. The Mayor's Youth Council has been super engaged. They do a really good job and they wanted to get involved, but they wanted to bring more of a young person's perspective. That's something I definitely value. One of the things that we heard in schools quietly, especially when there were some shootings around some of the schools, when Dr. Thompson was a superintendent, was that some of the young people didn't feel safe enough to speak up about it, but they will talk in smaller groups. So being able to go to something like this where young people feel safe and they're going to talk about what's going on, take a stand against violence, I think is powerful. So again, next Saturday, or this Saturday, May 10th, from 3 to 6:30 over at East High. 3 more things. You just heard the budget presentation. Another thing that's been in the news and that you'll continue to hear from me, while unpopular in some spaces, is a need to increase taxes. And that's either a mill levy increase, which is property tax, or a sales tax. What you heard was about 75% of our budget goes to salaries. We really don't have wasteful spending. We don't need a Doge here. If you really look through what we're doing, it's truly investing in our community, whether it's infrastructure or our staff that provide the services. And I say we need to increase one of those, because at some point you're going to start seeing a reduction in services and a reduction in staff. That's just reality. And for everyone who has reached out to me and said, well, just cut spending, that means firing people. If you want to push projects out 20 years, that's deferred maintenance. If we don't want to have the quality things that we have, we're not seeing the private sector investing at the levels that they could. So what happens to the city? And for everyone who just looks at the core functions of government, police, fire, public works, all of those folks are going to need raises. We're trying to be competitive. We've given some raises. Fire got a significant raise. Police, I think, is one of the top paid in the state now. But that means that other surrounding communities are going to be raising their wages, trying to take away our quality staff to go work there. So wages are going to continue to go up. We haven't raised the mill levy since Michael Jackson performed in the Super Bowl. And that was a long time ago. So at some point, we're either going to have to raise the mill levy. I'm not saying extreme, 1 or 2, or implement a sales tax. I didn't think sales tax would catch a lot of support, but it seems council's talking about that now. So a sales tax, 1% for the city of Wichita is probably north of $75 million a year. Raising the mill levy, 1 is about $5 million a year, 2 is about $10 million. So when you look at our budget deficits, those things could help. If we did a sales tax, that could be some potential investments in infrastructure, which could offset budget numbers later. We just started that conversation. We don't know what that looks like. But if it is a sales tax, that would go out to the ballot, so you get to say yes or no. And mill levy would be the city council. I think a simple majority of us could say yes to that, and that would happen. But either way, there's going to be some tough decisions coming. I won't be in office after the next 8 months. So again, that's going to be the type of government that you want for you. And if you want a government that's reducing services and reducing staff and not making those investments, then you can support not taking in the full assessed evaluation, which was Plan 2 that was presented tonight, not raising the mill levy and not doing the sales tax. But at some point, it's going to become painful. And I used to use this as a joke, but now it's serious for all the folks who would kind of talk to me about street sweeping, and they loved it. It came 4 times a year. Then pandemic recession came, and then we had to do some cuts, and that was one of the things that got cut. We didn't hear a lot of people saying it. And then I used to joke, I don't hear that from anyone. Now I hear that pretty much every neighborhood. Where's the street sweeper? And you can look at all that online, but where's the street sweeper? It doesn't come as often. We still have all this sand out here. We have this leaves in the street. Just little things like that, little by little, you'll start seeing services that you used to have that you won't have. So I leave that for everyone to decide for themselves. The sales tax will be on the ballot, mill levy will be up to us. Please let us know what you think. But ultimately, I know what I would love to see from government. And I know what my vote would be as a citizen or as a council member, but that discussion is happening right now. So I do want you to know that that will come up. You'll hear me talk about it every retreat that we have where I'll bring up, we should raise the mill levy. I might start saying sales tax too, but I'm gonna say something about that. Lastly, I just got an email. I haven't read all of it just yet, so I won't have a lot of specific answers to questions, but the president's budget proposal just came out and it looks terrifying. And just some highlights I looked at, it would eliminate CDBG, it would eliminate the home program, significant cuts to services, disability services, things like that that people need. Now, that's the first step in the process. Congress received the president's budget, they debate. A lot of times they don't listen to the president and they either add in there, but if they go along and keep along with what this president wants to do in those cuts, you're gonna see some real terrible stuff happen. And that's not just being scary. CDBG funds a lot of good stuff in this community. This center comes from CDBG. So some of our staff are paid by CDBG that provide those services in these communities. So if those cuts really do happen, that means all that money, if the municipality or state wants to keep it, will have to shift that into their fund if they have it. And you see that we already have deficits. So if we lose those federal funds, it's not gonna be good. So hopefully Congress, that means call your congressmen and senators, some of them listen, see what they can do to help out. And then my last update is, if you hadn't seen it in the news, on 29th and Grove, we did meet our $1 million match that was required by the state funds to provide screening and testing to the residents impacted by that groundwater contamination. Again, we always knew we would get there. We just needed a real plan. So I know that we saw some temper tantrums. That doesn't get resolution. Working through getting planned, getting the funding will do that. So we rolled out the timeline. The RFP will go out. And when I say we, we're working with Sedgwick County, but the agreement was between KDHE and Sedgwick County. But the RFP will go out by June 1st. Applicants will have until July 15th to apply. There is a community committee made up of neighborhood presidents, a few state electeds, that was reviewing all of this with us to make sure everything's aligned, all the money's being spent in the best way possible. But it's a long-term sustainable solution. It's not something that's just one time. That was what was initially proposed. So this is something that over the years will work. Communication will go out shortly after, once all of that happens, that will start getting people knowledgeable about what's going on, encouraging them to go get screened and tested, and hopefully getting some real answers for people. The real sad part about it is there's no treatment dollars. So you'll find out you have it, and hopefully you have the right insurance to take care of it, but if not, any dollars for you, lost family members, or any of that will probably come from a lawsuit with Union Pacific. And until that happens, there are no treatment dollars. But our goal is to make sure we can get you tested to the level to find out if you have it, so you can start taking preventative measures if possible. Yeah, so that's where we are with that. Happy to answer any questions from the DAB and the community. Any questions?
Just have kind of a follow-up, and to provide perhaps some context to these cuts on government programs. If you want to read a really great book and it's timely, it's Poverty by America. The author is Matthew Desmond, Pulitzer Prize winner, but he provides a great deal of context of what has happened when government programs are squished and brought down, so property taxes or taxes are saved. So just to tag on to what he had to say, that gives some context and kind of a wider view of how traumatizing these cuts will be. It's not in the library. I just checked. Sorry. Maybe you guys
I
can
will
get it.
request for that to be added to the collection personally.
Yeah, and the other book he wrote, man, the names, but anyway, it's a great writer. And I've actually quoted from the book, when I've addressed city council, and I think some of my other GAD members have read it as well. So.
I just want to say thanks for the 29th and Grove contamination. I know that was a long battle that required you all to work with the county and the state, and it's exciting to see that dollars are being committed to make this right to the best of the ability in which you all have the power to. And then the second half is working on the treatment dollars, but at least folks will have access to know whether or not they've been impacted. So I'm really grateful for that.
Any questions from the public?
Could you please put into context what, like, one increase in the mill levy per 100,000 valuation of your home would really raise or impact a household?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I normally do it. So that was the thing I didn't do. So we wanted to raise the mill levy one, just keeping it simple numbers. If your house is worth $100,000, that means you would pay an additional $11.50 per year.
Is that all? That's it.
And that would give us $5 million towards our deficits. If we did 2 mills, that would be $23 per year. So if you get a large pizza at AJ's or Nola's, that's about your mill levy. And again, when I said it, I knew the impact on lower income people. Any increase in taxes is a big deal. But when you look at just $1 per month versus sales tax, it's actually better.
Oh, yeah.
It's real money, but if you're paying 1% on everything you're buying throughout the year, you're paying a lot more. Hence why you get 75 million versus the 5.
So how do you get that out to more people? Because I've kind of been stumbling that for a long time.
I'll make it graphic. There are not a lot of elected officials that will proudly get out and talk about increasing taxes. Because I've been saying it for a while and they all know that, but I will put some stuff together to put out there. I mean, it really is, it's not a lot if we go that route. And I've even told people, you know, if the issue is what it's going to, since it's a property tax, that property tax could help with some of the property protectors. So all of our public service, fire, police, it kind of go towards that and offset those costs. And then the additional dollars we use for other investments. But either way, we just have a lot of things that we need to do. And councils in the past have made some really good decisions. I'm glad that my colleagues years ago thought to put some of our revenues into the strategic reserve to offset for these kind of years that we saw coming. So, I mean, we always try to do the best we can with tax dollars. It's not like we're willy-nilly doing things. Some of the investments that we made are necessary. So it's not a lot on the mill levy. But again, it's not a lot for lower income folks. When you have a house that's worth $1 million or $2 million, they see a bigger tax hike. For folks who can least afford something like that, this isn't that big of a benefit. I will also say, some of my colleagues have brought up publicly who's making this conversation about raising taxes and what district that is. And we have to really, we want to make that argument. We have to look historically at why some of our districts are in the space that they are and why they may pay less in taxes. And if you really get to the root of decisions that were made for decades that put them in the position that they are in, it's harder to make that argument. It is one that you'll hear because the request was made to show property taxes paid by district. A few of my colleagues have been kind of beating that drum publicly. It's lacking a lot of context. And it's not like folks want to be in a space where they're just paying a little bit of property tax. Everyone wants property tax. Unfortunately, there's lots to some people.
Why does the sales tax have to be 1%? What's the matter with like 0.5% or what?
So it doesn't have to be 1%. I use that because that's the easiest way to calculate the 75 million. What I will say is Wichita has this, it's not a bad thing. We have this Kansas nice, humble thing where we don't always want to invest in ourselves. You could do a half cent and take care of a few things. And while that could be good, when you look at even deferred maintenance from the parking garages, that's not always a popular topic, the parking garages. Some of our fire stations that we aren't seeing, so we're looking at building 2 new fire stations, Northwest Wichita, Southwest Wichita. Patrol West, I think is going right now for police, Patrol South needs to get rebuilt, expanded, Patrol North at some point. If you start adding those up, that's almost like $10 million per station. Fire might be a little bit less than that, because they don't expand as much as police. Those stations hold over 100 officers. You don't have that many firefighters at a station at one time. But when you just look at all of that, those needs are there. And there are people who literally have emailed me and said, it's good enough. Like, it doesn't leak, it's okay. They're making it work now. They can make it work longer. I've had people say that we don't need to make the investments in our community, but I watch how maintenance gets more expensive the longer you wait. So we're not always willing to do that, where if you do the full 1 cent, you really could line all those projects up. 75 million a year is coming in, and you sunset it after 4 years, you know you've got $300 million, right? Our CIP document is $1 billion investment. You would know in 3 years that you have $300 million that really could go towards those CIP efforts, so they're not waiting. Because I'll tell you, as this manager and soon the next manager and our finance team look at that CIP document, the reason why Elizabeth said that it could change every year is if we find ourselves in a deficit, there's things we won't spend. So if you were looking forward to this new police station or this improved park thing, and we go, okay, we just can't afford that right now, let's kick that out 10 years. It may never get done. There are projects that I've seen in the CIP just disappear because it just won't happen. So that's why I would always advocate for the 1 cent, and I would advocate for the investments that are necessary, especially in the areas that don't really have a lot of investment. That's why I am the person who will continue. I'm not the only one, but I always own my own actions. So I am someone who says we should be investing in Northeast Wichita, Plainview, close to Oakland, parts of District 6 that are more historic, but maybe lower income. Like, these areas don't always have a lot of things, quality of life things that you see in other parts of the city. And I don't think your income level really should determine that. So those areas, as we have this argument from some of my colleagues to say we need to maintain what we have, what do we have? And where is what we have? And if you're in an area that doesn't have new park equipment, that's 50 years old, maintaining what we have, and just keep that. And we just cut the grass. So when I say we should go for the full 1%, I'm really aggressive, and let's get the 1%. Hopefully 50% plus one will vote for it, and then let's fix all of these things or make these investments to make our quality of life better in the city. I know that was a long answer.
Anybody else? Is there anyone online?
Say this May 5th, 2025, Lonnie Barnes did not ask a question. I'm shocked right now. That's why
He wanted to, but he held up. Got more stuff.
I appreciate it. I think I'm gonna start sitting here at the podium.
There you go.
I know that. All right, we're gonna move on to the zoning portion. Thanks for being here tonight, sticking around.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Philip Ziegenbergen with the Metropolitan Area Planning Department. The first case we have before you tonight is PUD 2025-05. It is amendment to a plan unit development number 78. It is located at 1728 North Fairmount Avenue, so just kind of down the street from here. This amendment to the PUD is requesting a larger sign than what the PUD currently allows. The portion of the PUD, so looking at this map here, this is a portion of parcel 1. Parcel 1 kind of has an L shape, and then there's parcel 2 on the west side of Fairmount. So this is only for a portion of parcel 1. For the Fairmount Flats apartments that are currently there. The PUD limits the signage to those signs allowed in the B multifamily district. This is actually what this property was mostly zoned prior to going to be multifamily, or prior to going to the planned new development anyway. And the PUD was written to retain the signage that would have already been allowed within the existing zoning. The sign code for the B multifamily district allows for identification signs when consisting of 15-inch letters or less in height, carved or securely attached in a way that they are in architectural detail, building entranceway, provided further they are not illuminated apart from the building or entranceway, are not made of reflective material, and do not project more than 2 inches from the surface on which they are attached. If this, the applicant is requesting to have a single sign that is 4 feet by 50 feet, so 4 feet tall by 50 feet long, on the north face of the apartment building that is there. This is 3.2 times larger than what the sign code would allow. If you go to, you scroll down there, I think there you go. This is a proposed rendering. This is in your staff report as well. Proposed rendering of what the sign would look at. This is looking south at the building, so the sign would be facing. Your staff report identifies quite a good history of how the PUD came into existence and some other things that are going on and that have gone on in the past, but we're just focusing on the fact that this particular property within the PUD wants a sign that's larger than what is currently allowed. Is it important to note that when staff was going out to review this, the dwell apartments that's on the Vassar side of the PUD has a sign that exceeds what is allowed by the PUD, and when we investigated it, turned out they did not pull a permit for it. The PUD amendment is only for this sign. They would have to take a separate action in order to get the dwell sign approved, because the way in which they submitted and notified for this property, the dwell sign was not included. And that was just a matter of staff finding that out, and that was not the intention of the application. So if there's an opportunity to say, oh, well, the dwell apartments have them, well, the dwell apartments should not have had them in there. I think the owner of this apartment building is not the owner of the dwell. So even though it's all within the same zoning classification, I think there's actually 2 separate owners. So just to be fair and to be clear about that. So the neighborhood around this is mostly multifamily residential. There's some surface parking, there's some single and duplex residential nearby. I'm not going to spend too much time on the case history just because it is a fairly simple request in terms of what they're asking for versus the case history that got us here. Overall, staff is recommending denial of this. We find that it's not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Land use compatibility guidelines speak to having accessory dwelling units, duplexes, and small scale multifamily developments can be appropriate if it is small scale and is regarding this residential uses and the buildings are compatible with existing residents and the scale of the development is compatible with the intensity of the area. A large lighted proposed sign can be seen as sign clutter in the area. But when you get to the site pictures, you're going to see the distance between the wall of that building and the fourplex that is nearby. You can see that there's not a lot of space in between there, and the sign would be directly above that building. Not to mention they were requesting it to be illuminated from the back. And so you would have kind of a halo glow. Which that places for people plan, we also find it's not in conformance. We don't feel that is textual to the area. There are some larger signs within other PUDs in the area, or there was a variance granted for one farther down 17th Street, but those signs are on 17th Street. This is removed from 17th Street and kind of in the middle of the block. And that's kind of the basis for why we feel that this is different from those existing apartments that do have larger signs. You know, the larger signs are on 17th Street facing the university. The Northeast Neighborhood Plan update governs this area as well. It doesn't necessarily specifically talk about signs. However, it does talk about having to have type and style locations and signage throughout the area, including neighborhood signs, entry features, directional signs, and for attractions, neighborhood watch signs, monument, recreational signs, etc. And then working with the city on the regulation and placement of those signs. I'm just going to read this. Staff believes that this is specific to adding signage that identify neighborhoods within the plain area and not speaking to signage that would be placed on a multifamily residential commercial building. Regardless, staff believes that the proposed sign is not congruent with the overall intention and design. The sign code, we don't typically review the sign code and the intention of the sign code, but knowing that this specific request is to allow a sign, it would have been essentially a variance to the sign code had it not been PUD. The purpose of the Wichita Sign Code includes creating a comprehensive and balanced system for signage that avoids visual clutter, promotes business opportunities, and perverts the community appearance. When approving the Wichita Sign Code, the City Council found that unregulated signage was harmful and had harmful effects to the community and can result in visual clutter. The subject site is located away from the arterial road, Street. It's on a local street with primarily residential uses. The existing signage along the street is very limited. Staff finds that allowing the requested signage would have a type and size of sign that would be harmful to the community and is not in conformity with these signs. I'm gonna go through the site picture, you just scroll down to the last couple pages. So this is looking south at the building again, if there's no sign on it right now. That's looking on the Vassar side, again, that's the dwell apartments, that sign was not permitted officially. You can see this is the dwelling that's north of it. You can see there's really not a lot of space, and the sign would be installed up on the northern portion of that. You go to the next page. This is surrounding residential sites.
It's cute.
And
Notice that.
the far north, far right-hand corner in the top, that's looking at the apartments, and that's the existing signage it has for identification of the apartments. That sign does fit within the sign code, was permitted, and that's essentially what is allowed by the sign code for this. So you can see kind of the departure from what is allowed on the building to what they're proposing to do on the other side. There is alternative action. This has not gone to planning commission. We'll go to planning commission on Thursday. However, when we do recommend it now, we always provide alternative action should a board want to consider approval. So there is recommended action of denial. However, the alternative, if we wanted to approve, there's a couple conditions. They're fairly simply that the building sign not be illuminated. We feel that you can put it on the sign and not illuminating it would have less of an impact to the area. And that the sign would obtain all necessary permits. So at the publication of the staff report, we have not heard any public comment. And again, this is more on the early side of the cycle because it's coming to you guys first and going to planning commission Thursday. So with that, I can stand for any questions you have for me.
Thanks. And for the public, the way this will work is once staff reports, the DAB will ask maybe a couple of clarifying questions. Then the agent applicant will come up. They'll give a little spiel. There may be a couple of clarifying questions to the agent applicant. It will go out to the public then, and the DAB will listen. Once the public has finished speaking during this portion, it will go back to the DAB, and only the DAB will talk because they'll deliberate and make a motion. So I'll be clear when the public portion is going, and if you agree with another speaker, feel free to reference that speaker or expand on their comments to respect everyone's time. So any questions for staff on this? I guess my only question with y'all recommending denial, the WSU strategic plan for 17th Street, I don't know if the Asian applicant might be aware, isn't it to put a parking garage right there?
Right there, that's not our.
Because there's the lots that are near Kirby's there, right off of 17th Street, I believe. As far as I heard.
That being a WSU plan, that's not a city of Wichita plan, so we don't review it based on.
Right. The only reason I bring it up is the character, you're citing the character of the neighborhood. The neighborhood is already seems to have a plan of development.
Well, there's the WSU strategic plan and they can only do things on WSU owned property. And something, as you all know, plans have intentions.
Right.
And there's funding and there, the fact of the matter is there's not a parking garage there now.
Right.
So.
Fair. All right, we'll hear from the Asian applicant.
Thank you. Kim Edgington, PSC Consulting. I am the agent representing the applicant. So thank you for the opportunity to kind of give you some more details about what we are requesting tonight. We do recognize that part of the WSU strategic plan does include a parking garage, but it is actually to the west of the property that we are considering. I would like to hand out to you all just a visual of that would also demonstrate what this sign would appear in the nighttime as it is light. As you can see, the property really only does face 17th Street for all intents and purposes. The only thing between this property and 17th Street is one family, fairly dilapidated housing structure that has been vacant for about 20 years. So that has not been, frankly, I'm not sure that it is even habitable at this point after many, many years of neglect. So this sign, for all intents and purposes, does face 17th Street with only the parking lot that's owned by Wichita State in between this building and the street. So, in 2020, when this PUD was developed, the exact plans for the building were not entirely fleshed out, but the PUD was established to give some greater degree of flexibility in the development of this property. But at the time, not knowing exactly what the structure would appear to be, signage was really not addressed, and it was just left under the straight B multifamily restrictions. So if this were a commercial type property, it would be allowed 20% of the building facade to be allowed for building signage. What you're looking at this property is approximately 4% of the building facade would be covered with signage. So significantly less than if it were a commercial type property. My client has made significant investments in this community. Karen, can we show the map that? So if you look at this map, all of the properties numbered 1 through 10. Are owned by my client. Or he is a member of the ownership entity of these properties. Since 2005, my client has invested over $20 million in this particular neighborhood. Without asking for any kind of incentives, without asking for any assistance from the city of Wichita, he has rehabilitated historic properties and worked with MAPD within the context of bringing those properties up to higher standard. So we believe that this request is just something that can help continue his forward progress in this major investment that he has put forth and increased the amount of property tax receipts significantly over the previous property values. So the sign itself, if you look at this diagram, is we kind of modeled it off of some of the scaling and sizing of signage at Wichita State. Similar to some of their residence halls, some of their apartment buildings. So with this property being kind of in a university district, it seemed logical to follow what Wichita State University is doing. Because this property fronts on Fairmount and not on 17th Street, we have found it difficult for potential residents to know that that property is there and available. So this is an attempt to really cater to the clientele that this property was designed for with the university. So kind of as we go through some of the comments that staff made, the character of the neighborhood is overwhelmingly university and institutional uses. And this is certainly a supporting factor. Approximately 70% of the residents in this 50-unit building are college students. So They are market rate apartments. There is no subsidies that have been requested for this. And because it's on the north side of the building, there really aren't any neighbors that are being affected by that. We would hope that at some point that property that is vacant to the north of us, that we may be able to acquire it, that we could consolidate that into our property, or that the state may use that as part of their overall parking plan as well. The community investments plan, the Places for People plan, the Central Northeast Neighborhood Plan, the provision of high quality affordable housing is always at the forefront. So this is a prime example of providing that, an investor coming in with their own dollars, without any support, without any subsidy, and increasing the property values all throughout this neighborhood. So we would ask that you consider this request, consider how it is well proportioned, well designed. It's designed to match the architectural character of this building and several other of the buildings that this client of mine has built. They were designed by a local licensed sign company, and we would hope that you would consider this favorably. I'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Yeah, specifically about the lighting, looking at that image, when staff presented, I was thinking that having backlighting would create less light pollution based on that concern. Is there something to that?
No, there is, yeah, there's no channel, there's no light channels, there's no exposed filaments of the light. As you can see, kind of that, what's intended to be highlighted is that center orange color, which is kind of an accent color for the building, as you saw in some of the earlier photos. It is an LED light just because that's the trend in all lighting now. It takes far less electricity. You're not going to have elements that are burned out, which really doesn't do much for the aesthetics of any sign. That way, this sign will be continuous. It will have a very nice look to it. It's very aesthetically pleasing with this building. It was designed specifically for this area.
Any other questions you have for agent applicant?
I have a couple questions. I guess I'm kind of curious. Is walk-in business the only way you find your tenants?
Well, a lot of it is word of mouth. Friends have friends that move into the building, but it has been a challenge just getting people to recognize that that is an apartment building. A lot of it is just by visual, walking traffic of student population, seeing signs that, because all the signs have a QR code on them now. That's how.
So you don't advertise, you just count on people.
We do advertise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So is your lot occupancy low?
It's not low, but it could be better. And we just feel like we need the student population to recognize that we are there. And also, the general population too. It's a great location. You're close to transit. A lot of the residents there don't have cars. We have a lot of bike racks. There are a lot of bikes. But because the transit is so available, I find that a lot of the residents do not have cars.
You said that, is the owner here?
No, he is unavailable. He is out of town. And I apologize because I just was hired by him just recently. So my knowledge on some of the previous PUD issues is somewhat limited, but I know that Christina and Philip will probably much more focused on the previous PUD details than I am. But he had been under the impression that staff would support this request, until recently, some changes in those final staff report details.
You said that his investments have increased the values of the neighborhood. Is that proven? And over what
Oh,
period
yeah,
of
I
time?
mean, yeah, the tax statements, and the amount of property taxes paid today versus 2005 are.
Yeah, that could be almost anywhere.
Right, but I mean, so for instance, this property, just this property, was over $6 million.
Yeah, but I understood that you said increasing values of the neighborhood, not just that building.
Right,
So I didn't know if you could prove that, if his investments can be proven to increase rather than just a normal increase.
Right, I
And then
mean, there
my
are
next-
going to be normal increases, but anytime you have significant improvements in such a number of properties, there is incentive for the other properties either to bring their properties up to that level or essentially sell them. And then that's when he takes advantage of the opportunity to increase his ownership and continue to improve those properties.
And then just my last observation, if I were walking down the street and looked at that, I would assume that's an apartment building, and just like I would assume the one underneath it, that's not occupied as an apartment building without the sign. I would know.
But
I
by
would think I
having-
would know.
By having the identifier, and because everyone searches for everything on their phone now, that if student internet is walking down the street and sees Fairmont Flats, he goes to his phone, he does a search for Fairmont Flats, and that's the first thing that comes up is information about this property.
So you couldn't do a sign that meets code. I mean, you're asking. for
Well,
something-
the visibility, I mean, just because there's there is separation between this and 17th Street, that to get a visible sign, but that's also proportionate. If you put, I mean, if we can we put that up? If that facade of that building had the same letters as are on that top right photo, they would essentially be dwarfed.
Yeah, I trust the city to know what good proportionate stuff is. I have no more.
And
questions.
I mean, kind of going back to if this were a commercial building, which essentially it is, because the property taxes that are paid on it are assessed at a commercial rate. So a commercial building would be allowed 20% of the building facade in building signage. Where what we are asking for here is based on the size of the proposed sign, that is approximately 4%.
I will say it's good reference point to understand investment in the community, but I do get worried when we start talking about these revenue numbers. This reminds me of a few years ago when Belmont first came up and staff had recommended against based on projected tax revenue, and that like almost got into a lawsuit and things like that. So we have to be, it's good to know that investment, but we looking at other properties like that and making that determination, we would always have to couch other.
Absolutely, and that's where, we also wanted to bring up the point that we had looked at other buildings in, on the Wichita State campus and in the surrounding area, and essentially modeled this sign off of similar scale, similar size of signs that are found all over this district.
I guess I just want to point out too that there are different ways other than money to add value into a community. And simply, I think it's been really interesting hearing kind of your take on the developer coming in and buying up these single family homes or those that were once rentals, right? Tearing them down and then building these big industrial, making it into a commercial zone. So essentially what had been, when I was a student at Wichita State, highly residential to now almost a commercial zone, right? And then to your point, even more, we're bringing up the value. So you could just sell your house if we price you out and we're gonna make it even more commercial. So I think when you use the term value, to just be cautious, because it sounds like you're new. Just of some of the history in that neighborhood and the history that we've had from the community members that own in that.
Right, and it is a very fine line, because some of the properties that my client has, he has retained as single family or duplexes. If they were in a condition such that it made sense to renovate, rehab, bring them back up to their historical standards. Some properties just aren't like that. Some properties have been left in such a neglected state, similar to the property to the south or to the north of this, that there's no economically feasible way to rehab those buildings. And I get what you're saying, but these are, they truly are residential structures. And there's been an expressed need by the university and by this area for student housing. And that is what we are working to increase and improve.
Cameron, is Michaela online by chance? Because the reason is I think a few years ago, we dealt with a couple of zoning cases here. And I do remember, I think it was maybe the same applicant, that in this particular block area, we had, and the DAP voted, I think it was, trying to remember, it was a decent support for it, where most of the building homes in the area were vacant and dilapidated, and there was displacement of a family, if I remember, and we still made that decision years ago because of getting additional housing in there, if I recall.
And part of the PUD that went in 2020 included some additional land south of 16th Street. And that was not included because there was a general feeling that got more into an established, more single family duplex neighborhood, and that was determined to be an encroachment. So that was taken off the table. It's not part of that development, not part of this development. And this was solely north of 16th Street.
Kim, thanks for being here. So Philip mentioned the compromise, and I think he's become very familiar with the DAB, and I'm always gonna ask, he recommended that if we were to approve this, it would be under those certain conditions, and part of it was, I think the size of the lettering being up to city standard, as well as none of the backlighting. Would that be a compromise?
I think their compromise was that
That it would be lit.
the size
The
that
size
we
of the
have.
sign, if you approve the size of the sign, our recommended condition was that it just not be lit.
And what is your take of the?
Well, we are asking, because we all know that however many hours of that, especially in the winter time, it's going to be very difficult to see this sign if it's not lit, and that we had attempted to design the lighting such that it is as minimally intrusive as possible with no exposed channeling. And we're certainly willing to limit it to only a backlit, and if it needs to be turned off, we can potentially look at something like that.
Philip, is that allowable under just backlit? Is that allowable?
Yeah, there's being in a PUD, like lighting is allowed on signage in different districts, just not in the B district. And that's what they're asking the department from, is the current standard that was written into PUD. But because it's PUD, you can deviate however.
PUD is really a great
It's
tool.
a custom thing, so we put boundaries on it to say the B district is that simple, just to reference the sign code. And so they're looking to customize where all the rest of the PUD would stay to the B district, and this one building would have the ability to have this one sign.
And you mentioned that when you all thought about this, it would create a halo effect.
That's just from our perspective of looking how close that building was and having lighting behind
Good
it.
property,
You're gonna possibly have, you don't really know till it's up, but we didn't wanna let it up and then have light pollution issues.
There's a lot of light pollution on that parking lot already. Tons of light pollution. That parking lot's lit up.
I think he was saying like that's a Wichita State thing versus like city.
I understand, it's just that they're looking at the character of the neighborhood where this light is going to be projected in light pollution. I'm not trying to be light of it, because because I'm just seeing what's already there, is what I mentioned, like what WSU might do, but what's already there. And I'm over there, especially with Kirby's and Hassan and his shop developing more and more folks parking in that lot. I park in that lot, a good few days a week, so.
And I think that staff was also, attempting to take into account that residential structure that's there. However, that structure, the owner of that structure has really, has neglected that property. And so protecting a structure that has not been inhabited for at least 20 years and, likely is not going to pass any kind of code that to be inhabited, and that entire parking lot is zoned LC limited commercial. So in all likelihood, the property that structure is sitting on would at some point convert to a commercial type use, whether it's a parking lot or part of parking garage, any other kind of structure like that. In reality, it is not functioning as a residential structure at this time.
Any questions, Dab? Oh, thank you so much.
So you ready for the public?
Yes, yeah, you do that.
Now I got some questions. Can I step up here?
Yeah, make sure to address your comments to the Dab.
Guys, you'll recall here, this little cute property here, that's my property. And so this property here sits directly across the street from this property, right there. And so I want you to look closely when I talk about this. I came in here for the applicant here was trying to be expanded. It originally was a block over the first set of property built across Fairmount Park in the corner. They came in and asked for an expansion to go across down 16th, Holyoke coming on. You guys okay with variation. Now, when I came in and thought it then, because this parking lot came in, even was not properly permitted here before they built. They didn't get the proper permitting and everything for it here. Once they got the PUD approved here, then they just grandfathered it. They said, well, the PUD says that they can change the zone. When I tell you this parking right here, this chain link fence and this fence, I got this much distance between the wooden fence and my chain link. Come right up to the property line. They fought back about putting this barrier up here, the screening up here, and they said, well, we don't have to do it. I have residents, have this property since day 2. Now I take my neighbor on the other side, WSU, that's them, and that's their fence going down there. It came back in here about 30 years ago in here. And so you kind of boxed in, but here's the thing, you make lemonade out of it. And so I'm not fighting development, I'm not fighting progress in this portion of it here, but I'm saying let's do it right and let's be fair in this here. Either one of them, WSU or Barhouse, and we're on the side over here, they came and just did what they wanted to do, and then when it got their blessing forward and continued. And so it's the same thing now. When I talk about this lighting up here, some of them have already done it, and they'll go try and get their blessings for it later. You can't ignore, you brought up a conversation about Wichita State and what's going on, their 10-year plan. They just blew it up here a couple of years or so ago about what's coming in this parking lot. This right here, they're proposing putting a parking garage right there on the other side where that fence is. And in both parking lots at base 17th Street, they're going to be 3-story business and retail spaces. Wichita State's on the other side is going to have retail spaces. That whole look of 17th will be a commercial look. It will not look like anything. This guy here, Tom, that had the place over here across the street, when he says it's next to him, Tom, he's had his as long as I have. I think he just recently sold. Tom about 90 years old. They were waiting until Tom died out and try and come get his property. So I think there's a group out of Texas that brought that property. They come through there and cleaned it out, gutted it out,
cleaned it up, they're gonna do something. So it ain't as though they're just sitting there and it's not gonna be something. So they come up and visit it often in here and maintain this to make sure that they keep the property together. So something's gonna come. And so pretty soon, the 3-story building, parking garage and the lighting and all of this here, it's gonna be lit up over here, regardless of distance. So what I'm saying in this vein in here, guys, in here, they've got to be boxed in because that PUD not only goes from here, it goes all the way down 16th Street, wraps around, it comes in the back of my building as well to join in with Wichita State's Park. And I will become new apartments and mixed use retail and apartments in that area. So it's gonna be a commercial type area regardless. I'll be obsolete looking at here now. I don't think it's gonna look like this all the time because this is gonna be a lemonade out of this lemon. Whether I develop it or get co-investors to come in, because I'm one of the few original property owners, one of the very few minority property who are in this area. So whatever I hold on this property, because this is part of our retirement package, the legacy I leave for my family, the investment in my community. So my thing is out here trying to drum up the support for my community. What can we do with this property that gives us some light in our own community? Because once all this is developed and the parking lots on this side, none of the rest of the communities around it can afford to live in this here or rent the retail space. I'll be the only one that they can afford to come in here and grab still an attachment to this community. You know what I mean? So what I'm telling you in this point is, I'm not fighting the progress, but what I'm telling you is this here, if you're gonna be as lenient, let him do what he wants to do and then get his blessings after it in here. When I come in and ask for things I need to get done for this here, which will be just as supportive of me as well.
I hear you in the frustrations you have with that parking. As far as, and you brought up other signs popping up, but as far as this case, with them going through it and not having.
I'll make a recommendation. So, even though the city does not deal with Wichita State and what they're gonna do on their part, but it's coming. We know it's coming. They've already told you it's coming. They told you what kind of construction is gonna be over there and how lit up it's gonna be in here. So why don't you make him wait and see what comes with Wichita State's life? And what kind of structures they put up in here. If it truly turns into more commercial zone lighting, well, they're gonna build in that parking lot next to the retail building, that little apartment building he has as well. And so, yeah, there'll be signs and lit up office spaces and everything else up there talking about the businesses that are in those buildings. So why don't you wait and see what comes up with their lighting, and then as an elected community, decide if he's out of line.
Sir. Yeah, feedback from the public. We're gonna turn it back to the DAB. Is there a motion? I'll see if I can get a second, for discussion. But I would say that, especially looking at property at the same latitude, zone limited commercial, as well as properties on limited commercial, block southwest, and all the lighting that's already there, on 17th Street. I'm actually not as opposed to this type of lighting, especially versus just looking at the shape of this building. It actually, I feel, gives a bit of character, and there's going to be the mixed use that we have talked about with some of these cases in the past, where hopefully there will be grocery storefront options and things like that. And that is kind of what we're seeing, and that is kind of what folks are investing in, and even the tenants at the small bars in the area are looking forward to in the future as well. And Hassan putting money into the exterior of his place. So I would actually make a motion to accept, to approve this, not deny it, with the exact sizing being proposed at the 4%, and with the exact lighting being proposed. No additional lighting, and that the backlighting has to be respected down to the T of what is being said is supposed to happen.
I agree with you, Tech. I second that motion. I think the way they've done the signage is very respectful. I think it speaks to the character of the WFT neighborhood, and I think they've done a nice job presenting the signage. While I respect what you have to say, your house across the street, I understand your concerns, and I think the sign is only 4% of the building, which is also respectful and using the backlight, so I second.
Discussion on
So, LaWanda DeShazer, and I'm always gonna speak on behalf of the community. We made an exception here, make an exception there, make an exception here. Fairmount neighborhood does not exist anymore. We know developers bought property and they let it set and they let it get dilapidated and then they bulldoze it. And so I'm always in favor of trying to protect neighborhoods. And you guys know when they built those apartments, we made an exception. Well, you know, the community plan, the long range plan says we're gonna make green space and walkable space. And then the apartments come in and say, well, we want an exception. Maybe we don't need so much green spaces. We want to maximize the number of apartments that we have. And so it's not, to me, it's not, the apartments are nice, but the area isn't pretty. And that's one of the things that we talked about, green space and walkable space. And we made exception here. And so again, once we make exceptions, we keep making other exceptions and other exceptions, and then the community no longer exists. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to vote in favor of that. I'm going to vote in favor of what came from the city to deny it.
I agree with Wanda. I feel like the city has done their work. They have their professionals. And if their recommendation is to deny this, then I haven't heard a compelling reason why we should go against what the staff recommendation is.
Philip, how long has the limited commercial, which is at the same north-south placement of the block, west on Holyoke, how long has that been the big commercial? Cause that's like that is a part of my reasoning on like saying that it would still fit in, because it's not, if I'm looking at the properties even further south, I understand that argument to deny. I don't understand as much, seeing that Holyoke's got a big commercial, big block.
I don't know, off the top of my head.
Philip, can you remind me of under what, if we were to approve this, under what conditions? Can you just refresh my memory?
So the staff recommended condition, if you were to alternate action, so that it could assign permit, and that it would not be lit. So the size would be, our recommendation for approval, if you were to approve, would be to decide the size is okay, but just not a few things. And that's not the motion on the table. The motion would be since you for what the applicant.
Correct. With the substitute motion,
We could substitute, or we could just take that vote, and then if we need to.
sure, absolutely. Yep, but so on this motion specifically, I will be voting no, not because I don't appreciate all that was said. I do understand having the visibility of the signage, especially for students who are in that area. And I do believe Fairmount neighborhood is fairly a great walkable space. And so I can completely see with a lot of the fraternities around there, the field house, a lot of the other places as well. We were just on Open Street, 17th Street, very walkable. My concern is, especially when we heard from Mr. Barnes, that there may be something happening in that house scene unit that's to the north, I believe. And so my concern is how that lighting would either discourage someone from building what could potentially be affordable housing and or housing in general when we need more housing. And we need to do our very best to uplift, commercial property as well as being good neighbors to residential property as well. So that's why we'll not be supporting the current motion on the table and offering a substitute motion if it fails.
And we'll take it to a vote. All in favor of approving with the specific size and lighting as proposed by the agent applicant. Positive sign. All right, 3, all opposed? I don't think there's a.
No, because I had it.
Oh, sorry.
And was that 4 or against 5? 4.
So it's 4/4. 4-4.
Can I see Renee's?
It would be 4-5 then. When, no, yeah, it's 4-4. In this situation, I think it's happened once before with Councilmember Johnson. This, it would just still be reported as a tie. Does it affect the? It's not.
It'll be on our green sheet as 4-4.
Okay.
So.
Essentially it goes on as no recommendation. Unless, correct me if I'm wrong, could a substitute motion be put on and possibly change, somebody might change the vote?
Good. Since if it's different.
Correct.
And then both votes would be reported.
The minutes would reflect that this vote happened and then if the substitute vote.
Really report both votes.
Cut out.
Sure, I'll place the substitute motion on the floor to accept the alternative recommendations by planning, if approved, which is basically the size of the lettering remains with no lighting.
I'll second that for the vote. Any discussion on that? If not, positive sign, Joseph. Yes. This
Can
is,
we take a motion to accept the substitute motion?
well, I think what we just said, and if as long as Phil's fine with it, we're gonna report both votes. Since it was a tie, now we're kind of open to an additional.
If my understanding is when there's a tie vote, it essentially is not approved for lack of majority, and the motion fails, which provides an opportunity for an additional motion.
So it's a new motion, not a
Correct.
substitute.
It's a new motion, but either way, like the first motion failed for lack of majority, there's an opportunity for a new motion, which is what Joseph.
And I would just, clarify then in the minutes that there were, then the two votes, so the council's informed. The dynamic votes then. So we are voting on Joseph's new motion, which would allow the sign lettering, but not allow the light. Correct? Correct. All right. All in favor of that motion, positive sign of aye. Any opposed?
Substitute.
7-1.
I just want to on one no vote, correct? None? All right.
Motion to approve with no lighting.
Yeah. Not the next case, please.
Okay. Got a disclaimer about this case first. The applicant for this application is Christina Reed, on the compliance staff. But the disclaimer is that yes, it is her application and our city planner, she did not do any work on an application and other staff members did it. She had no part of the review on. This application is from the Center Fund at a property located at 265 South Virginia Avenue. For an accessory apartment, the applicant, Christina, has a detached garage, ready for single family residence. The detached garage has space above it, and she would like to convert it into an accessory apartment. The Unified Zoning Code has 4 stipulations for accessory apartments, maximum of 1 per lot. So this would be the only one should be allowed. The appearance has to be compatible with the dwelling unit. The structure is already constructed as part of the detached garage. It would have to remain under the same ownership, and that the water and sewer services would have to be tied into the main service in house to help support not being bought and sold in condominiums, stuff like that. The character of the neighborhood around this is low density residential with some single family dwellings, duplexes, and some multifamily development by. And so kind of a mixed bag of different densities within the residential neighborhood. It is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, which identifies the area for residential development. It aligns with the Places for People plan, which identifies strategies that want to promote diversity of housing options, to allow for existing residents to stay or possibly attract new residents to the established area, as well as a strategy to have housing that is, or uses that are contextual to the environment, especially in an older neighborhood like College Hill. These types of things were very common. We feel like it is contextual. Overall, staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions that are in your staff report, that is simply mirror the regulations that are in the Unified Zoning Code. This went to planning commission on the 24th of April. They recommended approval 11-0. The only comment was from the neighborhood association president, support for the application. Otherwise, we have not heard any public comments against this application, and I can stand for any questions.
There aren't any questions? We move to Agent App.
Good evening, Christina Reed. It's good to see you guys again. Just for context, this is currently my wood shop. It doesn't have any insulation right now. It has electricity, there's no water or sewer. But the first step into getting water and sewer is to get it zoned for an accessory apartment. I don't have any solid plans, although like I've been in conversation with my little sister from Big Brother Big Sisters, and she's really psyched. She wants to move into that space when she turns 18. So, but I don't know how it's gonna pan out. But it is gonna be a long process because there's currently no water or sewer, and that's a hefty expense. But this is really just the first step in the process. So with that, I will stand for questions.
But sorry, comment. You're my neighbor. I walk past there all the time. So if you see me with my golden retriever, feel free to wave. Sounds good.
I oddly have a question.
Yes.
Is it weird to be the agent applicant and not the city staff?
A little bit, because I even asked Philip, I was like, oh, do you want us to divide who's presenting the staff reports? He's like, nope, I've got all the staff reports tonight. You are just a citizen from District 1. So, yeah. And as I mentioned a few months ago, when I was a planner here at the DAP, like, I'm really excited that this is my very first house and it's just a really gorgeous neighborhood. And, you know, I just love people pushing strollers and walking their dogs. And it's just a great place to be.
Any feedback from the public? This one is 0005. Not anything from the public, take it back to Dad. Case.
Oh, yeah, motion to approve with the staff recommendations.
Second that as well. There's not discussion, all in favor of the motion.
I do want to make a comment. No, I would just say, I think, especially, and I think you can speak to this too, with the neighborhood plan in College Hill, that, I mean, this is very supported by the College Hill neighborhood plan. So kudos to you for both doing something that makes you happy as the owner, and then also making sure that you're in alignment with what the neighborhood is saying that they want to. I think that's a great example of how to be good neighbors to everybody around you. So
definitely one of the best parts of the place is for people plan, especially allowing more socioeconomic opportunity with current housing already there. All in favor of approval, positive sign. Any opposed? Opposed here? Approved unanimously. Thank you.
You still have to stay though.
I don't.
The next application up from like a broken record, but is a conditional use for an accessory apartment in College Hill. This one's at 435 North Clifton Avenue. Staff recommendation is for approval. This is a single family zone property, again, located at 435 North Clifton. It has a single family dwelling with a 2-car detached garage. The applicant intends to utilize the existing 2-car detached garage accessory apartment, so converting the garage into an apartment. Same stipulations apply to this. The character of the neighborhood is low density residential with single family homes that surround it. Again, if we find it's in conformance with the comprehensive plan, which calls for residential development, as well as the Wichita Places Local Plan, like yes, the forthcoming College Hill plan. So again, staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions of the staff report that mirror the stipulations in the zoning code. Like Christina's case, it went to planning commission on April 24th. They recommended approval 11-0. The College Hill Neighborhood Association president voiced the support, and we have not heard any public comment against it. So with that, I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff, agent applicant? Thanks for sticking around.
Oh, that's part of the day. All right. We'll make it an accessory apartment. Aging parents eventually want to be able to build something that has zero entry that they can come in. The way the current house sits with the property line on one side, we can't do an addition to the south. driveways on the north side, setbacks from the west to the east. And then we went back to the west, there's some foundation issues going in there trying to tie something. So kind of the best option in order to create more space in the house is to just turn the garage, accessory apartments 24 by 24. We're not changing the footprint, not changing any setbacks on anything. We are able to tie in all the electrical and sewer into existing in the house. So pretty simple. It's the 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment. Questions?
So you're really gonna give up covered parking for your vehicle for your parents?
Yeah, I'll drive my cars.
What a nice son.
Any questions for that from the public? And we'll take back to the dad. Motion,
Move motion to approve. I'll second.
seconded by Chelsea. All in favor of approving, positive sign?
Yeah.
And opposed?
Have a good night.
So the last item tonight is zone 2510. It is a request to rezone property currently zoned TF3 two-family residential to B multifamily residential at 117 North Volusia. It's a two-family home. The applicant is intending to convert the single-family home into 5 apartments. Cameron, if you want to scroll down, there is on page 8, there is a schematic of how they look to turn the floor plan into 5 apartments, 3 on the main floor and 2 on the second floor. They will be constructing an exterior staircase there you can see on the left, that would be on the south side of the building. So that's between the home and the apartments that face Douglas. That's where the exterior stair would have to be constructed. They had to go to B multifamily because lot size is 0.16 acres, which is pretty common in this area. 2 plotted lots together. And B multifamily allows 75.1 dwelling units an acre. If you just do the simple math based on the acres, technically they could get 13 dwelling units an acre. But the thing you have to think about though is you have to provide the parking, and then there's some screening and landscaping requirements. And if you like mash all that together, you're probably not going to get much more than what they got with 5, having to meet all of the other requirements. So don't let that 13 number freak you out. That's just the simple math of if you just take acreage times the density calculation. Going to be multifamily also starts kicking in, or really any multifamily designation when you're next to TF3 zoning or SF5 zoning, kicks in compatibility, setbacks and height requirements. The property to the north and to the west are zoned TF3 two-family residential and develop a single-family homes. There's a compatibility setback requirement. For the size of this lot would be a 15-foot compatibility setback requirement along that north property line and the west property line. It would make this house non-conforming because this house is not 15 feet. That is allowed. They don't have to like somehow pick up any. What that means is any future structure, if built on this side, would have to comply with that compatibility setback, or in the future, if they were to remove this house and were to rebuild a different type of multifamily residential dwelling, then they would have to meet that compatibility setback. In the future, just make this one non-conforming, which is about the height compatibility is a little bit more important in this, just because though being multifamily would allow 55 feet in height, because it is within 15 feet of TF3 zoning to the north and west, they're limited to 35 feet, which is the maximum height in TF3. So essentially you're matching the maximum height to the residential zoning to the north and to the west. So that wouldn't change at all. If this were to be demolished, they couldn't go higher than 3. Going to be multifamily zoning requires screening and landscaping improvements. Here are the site plans. Greg, I know you provided a revised one for MAPC, and I'll explain, sorry, it was probably the page just before there. Oh, here you go, sorry. The revised site plan that provided for MAPC, all it did is identify a screening fence on the west property line and a screening fence on the north property line where screening would be required. That was a 6 to 8 foot privacy fence essentially. And that's all the revised site plan. There was not a lot of additional information on the revised site plan other than identifying where the required screening would be located. During the building permit stage, they would have to submit a landscape plan. This would require some sort of landscape buffer with trees on the north and the west sides as well. And that would be reviewed during the building permit stage, but that is required. Parking requirement for multifamily starts getting a little bit of an increase than two-family or single-family residential. Instead of just one per dwelling unit, start getting into 1.25 for a single-bedroom apartment and 1.75 parking spaces for a two-bedroom or larger. As you can see, when you saw the floor plan, they would all be single bedroom / efficiency apartments. So the parking requirement is 1.25 per dwelling unit. That equates to 7. As you can see on here, they have 7 parking spaces with the opportunity for a couple more. Something I want to note, if you can go to the aerial, please. This was something that staff discovered, and was a lot of public comment and conversation with the public regarding a parking situation going on, mostly due to these apartments that face Douglas. They're owned by the applicant. The applicant actually owns this property, subject property, the property to the west, and this house that also faces Douglas. When I was going out and taking pictures of this, they have an alley, which actually makes it really easy for them to access the parking. So as I got back here, I realized that the entire rear area is like a large, just common paved parking area. There's some zoning issues with that, like slightly affect this, slightly don't. Essentially, this property is not allowed to provide extra parking to another property the way it's zoned currently, or will be zoned as B multifamily. So for the applicant to continue to use this area or any extra parking they have on those for off-site uses, they will have to take zoning action in order to have ancillary parking. Think of the Belmont, extra lot next door, providing parking for a property to the neighbor. What's really interesting about the parking situation is, you guys are probably more familiar than I am, because I've only been in Wichita for 12 years, is that these apartments have existed since 1900. Literally, according to the tax website, they were built in 1900. The way this block developed has been this way since all of those buildings were built, which proves that that apartment building on Douglas has never been required to have off-street parking. And you can see it's pretty much built lot line to lot line. There's a little bit of space on its property back here. There's like 30 some odd apartments inside that building, and they were never required to have off-street parking. All of that is grandfathered in and not subject to the zone change request. Yes, it is owned by the applicant, but it is a separate property. It could be bought and sold separately, different project, different situation. There's a parking situation on both sides. Get parked up quite a bit. You get a 1-lane road. You often, people are discussing that they have to back up to let go. We provided contact information for traffic engineering. We provide signage, things like that. So it is a tricky situation where, yes, the applicant owns it. He owns multiple properties, but we are just focusing on 117 North Volusia, which by the site plan shows that it can provide these 7 required spaces. Technically, some of those extra spaces back there may not be immediately available to the apartments, which technically means they could be going back out on the street, which could make that parking situation on Volusia worse. But in terms of the merit of the zoning case, they have provided the required parking that is off-site. So that's just a heads up on that situation, because it was a very unique situation that kind of came to light as this application was going forward. So there was a very robust discussion at Planning Commission regarding that as well. Overall, staff is recommending approval of this. The comprehensive plan identifies it for residential uses. That encompasses all the densities within residential, and given the character of the area, especially with higher density residential development facing Douglas, that is zoned limited commercial. So redevelopment could happen possibly, like you have higher intensity uses allowed on Douglas, and then currently goes immediately to TF3. So a B multifamily property actually provides like a step down zoning effect as you go into the neighborhood. It is a small scale multifamily development. It is a single house providing 5 very small units. I think it was like 420 square feet. That missing middle housing that everybody starts talking about. The Wichita Places for People plan, very similar to the other cases we've talked about, of providing a diversity of housing options to attract new residents or keep existing residents within the ECA. Encourage infill redevelopment that is contextual to the environment. Again, multifamily development is not a new situation in this area, and they have provided the required parking that they're required to have. The Central Northeast Area Plan update also governs this area. What's interesting about this plan and they don't necessarily have a future land use plan, like some of the other neighborhood plans that we talked about. However, this plan specifically identified a top issue, in quotes, was housing. And some quotes from that plan talk about rehabilitating and repairing existing housing stock and revitalization of the area should be focused on rehabilitation, not demolition of existing. So based on those two goals that were pulled out of that plan, this is a good example of rehabbing and revitalizing existing housing stock and doing a good conversion to provide some additional housing units, but actually taking the housing stock out and provide a little bit of a different option for folks at a potential different price point when you're only providing efficiency. So overall, staff is recommending approval. We do have a protective overlay, which are further restrictions on the zoning. That would be that any dwelling structure shall be built with compatible architecture with the existing dwellings in the area and shall have hip or gable roof. Essentially, if they were to want to take out this house and rebuild something, it's gonna have to look like a house. The applicant should provide a revised site plan next year. We have detailing placement of buildings, location of required parking spaces, screening and landscaping. Again, a landscape plan will be provided during the building permit process if this is approved. The final one is parking is prohibited from being located on the east half of the property, so closest to the street. So prohibited being closer to the street, unless the building on the site is located between the parking area and the adjacent property to the north. And so what that means is, go back to aerial, sorry. So they have parking over here, there would have to be a building between it and the house to the north. So like, we don't want a parking lot on Volusia, not said Vassar, still up in Fairmount. But essentially making sure that the parking is more oriented toward the rear. If you're gonna have to have a building between parking and the property to the north, you're not gonna have a lot of space with movable push parking for that, which is where it is now, and that's what we want to protect, is that's the character of the neighborhood is you have a house facing the street and you don't have a parking lot. The planning commission, their recommendation was approval. They had an 8-2 vote. Several members of the public spoke, and we'll hear from them this evening. General concerns were traffic, parking, trash, property values, and noise. I'll let them extrapolate on what the concerns on for you, but I can stand for any questions that you might have for me.
Two that voted against, what was their reasoning specific?
Some of it was agreeing with the public comments with adding to the parking issue. If you have 7 spaces, well, that takes care of the people who live there. Well, then people have guests, and if there's already a parking problem on Volusia, that's going to add to it. So generally citing more comments that were provided by the public. I will mention that at the time of the staff report, we will receive one, but we did provide a packet to you guys and a packet to MSPC before the meeting of the large number of public comments we did receive. And disconnect of, we sent out our staff reports a week ahead of the planning commission meeting, and most of those came in after that. So, and you all got those in the email sent to you as well.
So you said they have the 7 parkings, but there's a technicality. So I want to avoid technicalities.
Well, the technicality really only affects utilizing extra parking spaces for a neighboring property. So technically, they have met their parking requirement. The technicality comes with how they can use that parking for a neighboring property that they own.
Which you said requires them going to get another project.
Well, in order to use extra spaces in this parking area back here, they would have to get a conditional use for ancillary parking. That's a separate action. They don't have to do that in order to convert this house. That's a technicality to continue using the parking area, how it's currently being used by providing common parking for all of their dwellings. So that's just a technicality that may affect the neighboring properties in that they really shouldn't be using that parking area for the other apartments that are technically on a different site. It does not affect how this zone changes. They have met the requirement.
The other properties.
They have met the requirement for this zone change.
Questions? Will, can you speak to the stop work order?
I am not in the permit business, so no, I cannot.
No worries.
I have a question.
Why did it look like that this was withdrawn and then put back on? Was that just a?
That was just a miscommunication.
Okay,
This,
okay.
as you probably saw, this had a large number of pending cases. We had a couple of them withdrawn kind of at the last minute.
Right.
Just a miscommunication where information was sent, but with 6 original cases on the docket, it'd be very easily misconstrued that it was just a mislabeling of the wrong case.
Cause I didn't get a chance to drive by this. I
Yeah.
took it off my list,
So,
so I don't.
I didn't
have
review the agenda till today when I was kind of preparing for the meeting and I pulled it up and emailed Cameron as soon as I could, but
Okay, no, that's fine.
Zone 2512, which is on Hillside, was the one that was actually
Right.
withdrawn, and it was the mix up between that one and this
Yeah.
one, so. Yeah.
Anything else, Phil? Okay, Asian applicant?
Council member, members of the District Advisory Board, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent the owner of the property. We concur with everything Philip said. We have no problem with the protective overlay. The intent is to take this building and add additional affordable housing to the area. We have adequate parking, and that parking, now that its staff's aware of it, and I'm not sure the owner was aware that he wasn't allowed to, but now the staff's aware of it, that parking cannot be used by anybody but that house. So we're not taking any parking from the area because it can't be used by him. It's not allowed. It would take another action, which he has no intention of going through, to allow that parking to be used. So the goal is to take this house, make it into some affordable housing. I don't know if you're familiar with what he did at the corner, I believe it's Grove, it's right across the street from East High, where he took that commercial building. You can drive by there, it looks great. I mean, that's the kind of work he wants to do here. He has converted a number of buildings to affordable housing and has been very successful in doing that. That's his goal, that's his plan. But again, all of the opposition is because there's not enough parking for that apartment complex. That doesn't have anything to do with this case. Because those spaces can no longer be used for that apartment complex. Staff has told us that. I have notified the owner that he's not allowed to do that anymore. So that's gone. That whole issue is really not pertinent to this case. This case is whether or not that house is suitable for multifamily. If you look at the aerial, you'll see that there is light commercial. Then we're going to step down to multifamily, and then you'll see some office to the north. So this is truly a mixed use area. We're going to continue it as that. Our house will remain as it is today. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Asian applicant? All right, thank you. Now we'll turn it over to the public. And I know Dad will probably ask, sort of looking and preempting it, if any of this additional information would change any of your opinions or look for a compromise or anything like that. Thank you.
All right. Victor Keaton, I live at this house. Right here.
Nope, go higher.
No,
No, one more. There we go. That's our backyard.
So just to clarify some things, I know he said that the parking's taken off the board because the people can't park there anymore. Well, that's not taking it off the board because the issue is there's already too many cars on the street. So now you're not gonna let the people who live in this one, who their grandfather did, we understand, we've been there ourselves for a long time. He's not taking it off the board because now the people here can't park there because only the house will park there, but what it does is it kicks them out on the street. So our issue is there's already too many cars on the street. Now there's gonna be more cars on the street because instead of a single family, it's a 5 apartment. So you're gonna have 7 more cars that have to park somewhere. And it's not gonna, he's right, he's gonna give all these parking spots to them, but the parking is already being used by this building. So those cars are not gonna run on the street, so you're gonna add more cars to the street because they were parking where they shouldn't have been. Now they're not gonna park there, anymore, so they park on the street. And my other issue is, I know a lot of people in the neighborhood will say this, is that's already dangerous. I don't go that way during the day. I always go up to First Street. Especially, I don't ever go that way to take a left-hand turn. I'll go down there and turn right. And when I'm coming in off of Douglas, I always slow way down, because it's always gonna be one lane. If I slow way down, make sure there's no cars coming, and I'm always watching my rearview mirror. Because if there's somebody behind me coming and they're coming pretty fast, I'll usually just go past the street, go past Volusia and do what it is. That's how tight it is. But I wanted to say, that didn't get taken off the table because they provided parking. Parking, these guys were already using away from them, so now they're gonna come out on the street. We've already got too many cars on the street, and there's a lot of traffic on the street. Any questions for me?
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here, for your time.
He was Charlie Mercessian. I actually live right next door to here. And they're talking about giving 7 parking spaces to these people. The previous people that rented this left in December. They had 3 vehicles. None of the parking behind was allocated to them. They parked their cars in front. Between each one of these houses, you can't fit more than 3 cars, maybe 2 on some of them. You have approximately 40 people renting here. So parking is a big problem. Now I called and I talked to the city engineer. He said he was gonna put a stop sign 30 feet back on both sides, no parking. So now that's gonna even decrease it more. But something's gotta be done, because when we come out of here, I came bumper to bumper with a police officer one day. He was making a right-hand turn into here, and I was gonna make a left-hand turn. My wife was with me. I had to back up past the alleyway, almost to my house, to let him come through. I was going like this to him. This is a problem for parking. The other problem is the people that own this thing here, this one here, this one here, and this one here. They don't take care of their properties. If anybody drives back and takes a look at this house, you'd say, how can anybody live in that place just by looking at the outside of it? The fascia board on the outside's got big holes in it. Now that's the same owner. The owner of this property, since December, since the people that were living there moved out, they haven't done one thing to the outside of that house. The fascia boards on the outside of that house, on the north side, they're broken up. The paint's peeling off. The bush or tree that's here broke and it's fallen up against the house. They were good enough to come out and mow the grass. But it still has leaves there from last fall underneath the walkway or the steps going up to the house and on the sides of it. The owner of this property doesn't take care of his property. If you look at this side of the property right here on the alleyway, there's a drain pipe that comes down off the roof. It's been hit numerous times. The pipe is crunched. And all that does is it causes water to go down into the ground next to the foundation and go down in, and that harms the foundation. Same thing over here. It's busted off. It's rusted out and busted off on the other side. I mean, the guys, I mean, these people, yeah, it may sound great. I didn't know they owned a property over there on Grove, wherever. But me, I have to put up with looking at what's here and previous ownership, making this, going from a single family home to 5 apartments is not gonna make our area better. These homes are all beautiful. We have a beautiful block between First and Douglas. These houses are all beautiful. I moved here in 22 because of that. I don't know, I think most of you all have got the pictures that I sent you. And I didn't, pictures tell 1,000 words. This guy's a derelict when it comes to taking care of his property. There's no way to turn around it. I'm gonna lose, if he makes that into 5 apartments. I've spent a ton of money, my wife and I have worked, I'm disabled, but my wife and I have spent a lot of money upgrading our property. And if they make that 5 apartments, it's gonna take all of the equity that we have built into our house away from us, just so he can make a few extra bucks. The alternative, in my opinion, fix the house up, clean it up, fix that house up, clean it up, rent them out for a decent price. They don't have to make that 5 apartments. They just don't. There's no need to. All they have to do is fix the house up and rent it. There was a comment that was made that it's gonna, in the last meeting thing that we had, on the 24th, that he's gonna lose, it's gonna affect him monetarily if he doesn't convert that into 5 apartments. I guess it would. If he's gonna rent each room for $600, he's gonna make $3,000 a month. That he can make a decent living on just having that house match all of our beautiful homes. That's all there is to it.
Any questions? I appreciate you going in detail on it. Give us an understanding.
Thank you. Thank you, folks, for listening to me.
I'm the wife. I'm Kathy. We live, like he said, we're right next door. And I know they're talking about the parking here. They're not considering the co-op that just went in and 2 hair salons. All right there on Douglas. The people are, the co-op was nice. And they put in a parking lot in the back, but they made it dirt and rocks. And the people that are driving their fancy cars to buy their $12 coffees don't want to park on their rocks. So guess where they park? They park in front of my house and Alicia's house and Lynn's house. So we have cars from the co-op. It can be totally empty in there and they will park 4 houses down and walk back. So we have all of that going on. We have the tree house up here. They come out when they get too busy. So there's more than just these guys parking. I know the representative said they're not parking there anymore. Oh yeah, they park there all week. And like we said, if you move them, they're coming here. So you're gonna move, how many park in there, 13 to 17? Anybody count?
Where at?
The cars in the parking lot now that is illegal.
Oh, there's
Either 13
about
or
6,
17
there's about
cars that park
16
back there.
spaces.
And if you sell no, they're coming here or behind on Estelle. We have theft. The people that get out for the apartments that park in front of my house, we graded, we're from Las Vegas. We put in the cement patio up front and graded it with rocks here. They crunch through the rocks, kicking them everywhere. They bring their dogs over and let them go poop, and they walk back here. It can be any time of the day or night. They scream, they yell. I mean, because they can't park here. And so if you tell them they can't park there, where are those 38 people going to park? And if you put 5 people in here I guarantee you, when there was one family there, we had 3 cars, it backed all the way up. Difference is, I know who you are. When I need to move you so I can get out of my driveway, I can knock on your door and say, hey, could you please move your car? I had somebody coming today, can you please move your car? We have people parking that'll be there for 4 days. We don't even know who they are. And I thought it was kind of funny, we talked about sign pollution. You're giving us people pollution and car pollution and dog pollution. And you're gonna drive down the price of my house. This house is for sale. I watched on Saturday, they tried to have an open day. The people couldn't park to go in to the open house. They parked all the way down here and walked all the way up to go into the open house. And after about 5 people, we haven't seen anybody else go. It's just, you don't want to buy a house you can't park in front of. You don't want to buy a house where your friends can't come over and park in front of your house to come in and see you. Nobody wants to park down here to come here. It just, it's overloaded. Our infrastructure isn't taking what you guys are giving us just because they're grandfathered in. It's just not working. Thank you.
Anybody else in the public would like to speak on this?
Lisa, are you gonna talk?
Thank you.
Our neighbors' voices to be heard. Because sadly, at the NAPC meeting, our concerns were only allowed to be voiced specifically to address number 117 only. But 117 North Volusia is not just an island location. It is an property. Number 2 street, on a street, and a busy street, it's very crowded. Number 3, it's part of the community. And number 4, in the uptown. I believe you all have received my emails and my corresponding photos, so I won't stand here and I believe the picture is worth 1,000 words. Seems like several of us are seeing that. And all the photos you have received portray an accurate depiction of our many concerns. We live on that street. And I mean, school buses have a problem, even letting children out on that street. So our concerns, parking, traffic, trash, dog gifts, and lower property values. So, thank you very much.
May I say just one more thing I forgot to talk about?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah, and feel free to do it from there.
Thank you. The plans on that apartment complex, 3 of the entrances are from the front of the apartment complexes. 1 is from the back. So
guess where they're gonna park? In front of my house.
On a personal note, I use paratransit all the time, and it's really, really important that they be able to pull up in front of my house, because otherwise it puts me on the stick with, or on the street with all those cars, and I feel that's, hate to get personal about it, but it's the truth. Anyway, thank you so much.
Easy.
RJ Gumbs, I live at the 230 North Volusia. I lived there for about 40 years. The problem is not new. The problem has been there forever. And the problem is not the zoning on this particular lot. The problem is here. Apartments that have no requirement for off-street parking. grandfathered in. I understand why they don't have it, but that's the reason that these people want to talk about just this one lot. They don't want to talk about the neighborhood. The MAPC report from Mr. Zuckenberger, I think, was directed for approval. It only got an 8-2 vote from the MAPC. That's a little unusual. And they depend on this report. You depend on this report because you can't assess every one of these things. That intersection has been lined with on-street parking on both sides for 40 years. It becomes a one-lane street, and as several people said, you try to go out, you try to come in, it's a one-way street. A school bus goes, it's on that route too. That's part of it. In a few things that I found offensive or incorrect in this report is when Mr. Zuckenberger was talking about the apartments on East Douglas here, he said the number of apartments and their bedroom count is unknown for all of the applicant-owned apartments on East Second Street. Unknown. He talked to the lawyer for the applicant. He couldn't ask how many there were. I walked in the public alley, looked at the apartments. There are 38 electrical meters there. There is a duplex next door to that, so figure 35 to 40, 42 apartments there. There are approximately 27 available parking spots coming in here, which leaves a number of units which don't have designated parking. And 7 of those they're using to justify the zoning, the change that they're asking for. So they're not adding any parking. They're simply playing a shell game with parking spots. The parking issue is significant, it's difficult, and it's dangerous. Some other language in the report to the MAPC. Converting the site from 1 dwelling unit to 5 dwelling units may have an impact on the net parking demand in the area. Oh, really? May have? Will have. You don't have to be very smart to figure that out. This whole thing is directed toward approval of the thing. And as was pointed out, denial may represent a loss of use or economic opportunity to the applicants. That area is now zoned for single family or double family duplex zoning. This house could be made into a duplex with the zoning is the way it is right now, have plenty of parking, make plenty of income. It does not have to have 5 new units with 7 parking spots, which are taken away from the existing parking spots. I hope you will consider this real carefully because it's going to start causing a significant change in the neighborhood and in the entire area if you start making exceptions like this. I hope you consider it very, very carefully. Oh, the last thing. You talked about, I think, good neighbors. Nobody's talked about the golden rule, which is part of the zoning commission literature. The zoning rule means you supply your tenants with a safe, adequate place to park, even if you're not required to. Hopefully, you'll think about it. Thank you.
Anything else from the public, or would like to even stand in to just visualize their opposition?
Oh, I would. Well, I live at 130 North Volusia, which is just across the street and down a ways. And yeah, the parking has just been horrible. Because some of the people at that apartment complex come down and park in front of my house, and on the weekends, they leave their car there all weekend. So I have no access to my area of parking. And as other people have pointed out, it's a death trap going down Volusia onto Douglas. You can't see any of the cars coming west. So you cannot make a left-hand turn unless you're gonna get T-boned. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing. And I'm wondering if this goes through, it's gonna reduce our property values. I mean, the people that live on that street have owned these houses for many years. I've been there for over 20. And I just can't imagine what that's gonna do to have 5 apartments in one house. I mean, they have to be so tiny, it's ridiculous. I don't know what he's gonna charge, but I can't imagine it would be that much. But yeah, I'm opposed to the whole thing. Sorry.
No, you're totally.
I have a question for you guys. Would you buy a house you could not park in front of, that you were constantly blocked in, where you couldn't back your own car in or out? Would you buy that house?
Is there anybody else from the public before we turn it, we will,
Could I make?
yeah, once the public's done, I just wanna make sure they get all their chance, cause when there's a lot of feedback like this, usually just give one final chance to answer to the DAB any of these concerns before we weigh in. So I just wanna give any final input from the public. Yes.
One last thought. I know RJ brought it up briefly and it was brought up in another discussion earlier today, and that's, hey, it's just this one spot, it's an exception. Well, you start making exceptions. Well, that house can do this. Well, this one there's one up there 4 away from that. Well, maybe the person that'll buy that's gonna turn it into 5 or 6 apartments.
That's what I mean.
Here we go with exceptions.
There is one other, there are a couple of others, but I forgot to tell you that there are people on Estelle also that are complaining of parking issues now. And I have petitions from Estelle as well, who's down our street, down Volusia. So that's something else to consider. They're having the same issue.
As we are. It's not just our street, it's also Estelle.
Turning onto Estelle off of Douglas, they're having the same problems as we are.
No, y'all are welcome. This is y'all's opportunity to speak.
There would have been more of us here,
I
honestly.
can show you tons
There
more
wasn't
pictures
this
if you like.
scheduling Thing where it was,
Cancel.
yeah,
Yeah,
canceled.
we all thought we were gonna come because it
Oh,
was
I
down that
see.
it was
Yeah.
often, it was full.
We got the heads up 3 hours before this.
Right, we
And there would have been more of us.
understood. Thank you very much. All right, we're gonna turn it back over to Greg and then.
I appreciate it, just, and make a quick point. Yeah, I guarantee you there's a parking problem on the street. Doesn't have anything to do, because the city now has told us that house, the parking behind that house cannot be used for that apartment building. As of today, it cannot be used. The city has taken away any parking that is there now for that apartment complex. That's gone now. Whether you approve this today or not, that parking is gone. The request and the reason, if you'd asked me how many apartments, I wouldn't have known either. I don't have anything to do with that property on the corner, and I'm not an attorney. Thank God. But you all have seen enough staff reports to know staff does not recommend approval unless it meets the criteria for approval. You saw one earlier today where they recommended denial. Staff doesn't have anything in front of them other than what's there. They looked and they said that when you have light commercial zoning, and when you have office zoning on the end of the block, that multifamily zoning is appropriate as a transitional zone, number one. Number two, that property meets the criteria. If that house that is for sale wanted to convert those, they would have to be able to provide 1.25 parking spaces per unit for whatever they built in there. They have a duplex zoning now there. They don't have to provide any other than what's in the driveway, and I think that's probably all grandfathered anyway because it's older. So we meet the criteria. That's why staff is recommending approval. We can't use that parking any longer. Those cars will be cited. And the owner of the property will be cited if he allows parking to be on that property. Unless we go through a very lengthy process to get it resolved, and I don't think has the wherewithal now that he wants to go through that. So just a couple points. Yes, there's a problem. And that problem's not going away. Nothing we're gonna do is gonna change that because the city has already changed it, said you can't park there. I just wanna make sure you understand, we didn't take that parking away for this. The city has already told us that parking's gone. You can't use it anymore.
So it's gotta come back to the dam now. I will say, I feel before there's any motion, if some dam members aren't making this connection, there's a precedent here that actually, Megan, we just dealt with that Erie case just a bit ago. And we made a decision on that Erie case, in part also framed on precedent on the Belmont case. And a part of that was when we looked at east of Hillside, we saw there was additional, more mixed use east of Hillside. And when we were making decisions back in the day on multiple rounds of Happiness Plaza, we were making decisions about alleviating traffic problems. So if you were voting for, we were alleviating traffic problems. We then go west of Hillside, support that project in Erie under these points on impacted community facilities, in part because it's solving a parking problem that we're hearing is not solved. And so my hesitation is that it would be like with my support and the reasoning for Happiness Plaza back in the day, it would break that, it would go against that logically to then support this. And I bring up that point because the city was, in my opinion, we went back and forth on this, the city was completely wrong in framing that when it originally came in front of this DAT. The city is sometimes going to provide a staff report where there are reasons to challenge it. And we have heard some reasons to challenge it beyond where if it solves the parking problem for just that property, then it suddenly creates a problem to vote against it under number 7, that the staff said to vote for it. It gives a reason to vote against under 7. It gives a reason to vote against it under 1. You could even make an argument that under 1, you could still have a duplex that's a larger square footage than would be allowed under this new zoning. And then also you could, we've heard the feedback. You could make an argument against every single one of these points 1 through 8, based on the feedback that was said, including the feedback that it would solve the parking problem for the property, but then it's going to then create this negative externality that then is a problem for the very reason that staff said to approve. And that's why I'm trying to think of, like, when we're talking about these exceptions, I'm trying to be mindful of connecting it to these past cases in us being, when we're making this logic and these reasonings, to be aware of, we did just do this case on Erie. And now we have a problem, we thought we were voting and supporting alleviating traffic on a street for the very reason we supported that project on Erie. And now we could take that in consideration just a block. So I do bring that up with all the cases we're dealing with that area.
I guess I'm confused by that because even if we oppose this and he keeps it single family or duplex, those 7 parking spaces aren't available no matter what.
They use it anyway.
Yep.
They're
Well,
fibbing
I
to
mean,
you.
I'm not,
It's full all the time. He can tell you they're not parking there.
They said on the 24th.
That would be the
that
last
was it,
day.
That they couldn't park there.
We can't do any crosstalk right now, sorry.
I'm
But
sorry.
I will say though, to that point, the idea that you would have more occupants who may use street parking for the very reason that was brought up versus using the current facility, that could go to the point that's being made about it's gonna create a further parking problem.
I agree. The other thing is I sympathize and I hear your frustrations and I feel differently about the interpretation of the golden rules. I appreciate your view on this. I was reading these differently and so I have an expanded view on this and I appreciate that. But I don't assume that the space in front of my house is mine for parking. You know, I just don't. I feel like it's anybody who wants to park on the street in front of my house. There's other communities where you might have to park blocks away. I have a sister who lives in Philadelphia. They have to park blocks away. There's no guarantee. I get that this is difficult. I like that the city is gonna make it safer by creating that area of no parking, at least from a traffic standpoint in that area. Unfortunately, you're right, it is gonna put parking on further down the street. But not going with what the city, going against what the city has recommended, I don't know how it's gonna fix any of your frustration.
So who's gonna fix it when they?
So all the conversation has to stay up here at the district advisory board.
And but I will say, no matter what is decided tonight, there will still be an opportunity for you to reach out to council members before their vote as well, before their vote. I do though, would push back that even if you're talking about the parking in front of your property, that definitely goes to points 5 and 7, impact on community facilities and relative gain to the safety of the area. Folks are concerned about traffic flow and parking and even getting out of their properties. So even if it's because that is why we get the feedback from the neighbors to clarify its impact on the community.
Yeah, Tex, I would agree with you on that. And number 5 is the golden rule that really concerns me in regards to this. So I've had the opportunity to go out to the property and walk the neighborhood and experience, because sometimes though pictures are worth 1,000 words, it's very difficult sometimes to visualize it. And so have the opportunity to go and yeah, it is dangerous. Even from my perspective as somebody who wants more density, I think our city desperately needs that. Love the project on Grove and the mixed use of housing and the commercial space on the bottom. I also think that when we talk about walkability and making sure that we have diverse use of housing, we also have to be mindful of how to do that safely. And we heard tonight from somebody who needs additional support in utilizing paratransit. And again, being a good neighbor is recognizing the diversity even within the neighbors that occupy the neighborhood. And I do agree with Twyla that it is exciting that the city is talking about putting those stop signs in to help alleviate some of that, but that is not the case right now. And so if I look at it, what it looks like right now, number 5, which relative gain to public health, safety, and welfare as compared to the loss in value or hardship imposed upon the applicant. The protection of public health, safety, and welfare is the basis for zoning. The relationship between the property owner's rights to use and obtain value from the property and the city's responsibility to its citizens should be weighed. And from my standpoint, when I'm thinking about the responsibility to our citizens in this case, I do not feel that it is safe right now. And hopefully when those stop signs are added, it will be something that we can revisit if it is added. So that's my perspective. And so I won't be voting in favor of what has been recommended tonight.
So if we vote no tonight, that house is it vacant, right? And it's under remodel, is that the understanding?
It's vacant.
Okay. And it's a single family home going to multifamily, correct? It hasn't been a duplex before, right? Okay, just walking myself through this. So if it's not able to be a multifamily home, what would it just remain a single family? Is there any other options that have been discussed or?
I mean, he could always make it a duplex and just turn it into mostly downstairs. I don't know what his plans are. I'd have to look and talk.
I was hearing from the neighbors that they would welcome a duplex, but they're just the 5.
Well, they don't have any choice on the duplex. It's already zoned for that.
Right, I understand.
I would ask Philip though, I saw under B multifamily, it said the duplex could be 2,000 square feet per unit. Under TF3, it's 3,000. So right now they are able to build a larger duplex.
Well, that's not square footage of public.
Oh, that's property. Yeah.
That's minimum lot area.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I was trying to clarify if there was any build restriction or difference.
We never have like a minimum square footage requirement. It's always based, lot area.
Thanks for clarifying.
To Chelsea's point though, right, the duplex, it's meeting the residents where they're at while giving the developer an opportunity to provide additional affordable housing. That's more than just a single family unit home.
I'm thinking there has to be a compromise here, because I agree with the neighbor, I mean, we've had so many emails and pictures about this street, and, you know, that's concerning. That is a crowded street. I didn't get the opportunity to go because I thought it was on the agenda, which is fortunate. So for the 7 parking lots, that's only for that residence. I can't. Gosh,
Unless it
so much
goes
work
through a
in it.
rezoning process.
Or they could
Yeah.
come back for a conditional use for ancillary parking.
Yeah.
For accessory parking that's off-site from the different use, that would come before this board, have the planning commission's hold a separate application.
Or the council could, no matter what we decide, the council could still approve this, right?
Right, so putting it like, put the period on the ancillary parking, yes, so currently where it stands is planning commission has a recommendation for approval with an 8-2 vote, subject to the protective overlay that was recommended by staff. This recommendation also goes before the city council. They don't necessarily have to choose between the two, they could go somewhere in the middle, but ultimately they're the final say because it is a zone change. Typically, they don't deviate too much away from one recommendation or the other because that's the purpose of this board and the planning commission. But that is where we stand. The protest period is still ongoing and ends this week, on the 8th by 5 p.m. So, that is still, outstanding in terms of what the protest is gonna be. That could inform the council vote. So we're still very much in the public process, before this is.
Phil, even if it was torn down and turned into a duplex, it would still follow under a restriction on architecture style. What's that?
No,
That's
if
what I wanted to
if this
clarify.
is denied and it's just straight TF3 zoning.
Right.
They could build a duplex however they want to design
Do
it.
you want to think about that, though, for conformance?
They could also just convert the building, but I mean, that's the way it is today, is there's no control over how a new structure could be built on it today. Whether they converted the house or wanted to start fresh, that's just the way the zoning is now, you can build a duplex.
I do see that as a reason for maybe a little consideration, because then it's suddenly, you could fall into the consequence of, then it's not in conformance to the neighborhood by as well, there's this to that too.
The overlay. Okay, so again, I always listen to the community, and when you want to preserve what you have, that resonates with me. And if we can, it fits the golden rule. And so I am glad I think what I'm hearing is that we are listening to our community, and I'm so glad to hear that. I have a neighbor that I may or may not have called on before. Goo gobs of cars. My house, I try to keep my house, in a certain, it looks nice. But you have neighbors that don't do the same. Man, I want to sell my house, but my house is for my kids, and I'm like, ugh. And so I appreciate when neighbors want to make sure their neighborhood stays viable and it's what you invested into your home. And when somebody else we love development, right? We love doing things new, but Fairmount neighborhood does not exist. It does not exist. And so I'm glad you all came. I'm glad you used your voices, and it sounds to me like it's being heard. So thank you.
Comment or motion?
Development,
My motion,
and also we have to be respectful to the neighbors in that community.
which we don't always do, but I'm so glad we're.
Yeah, it's with the motion,
I'm trying to find what it
you
says.
consider that protective overlay if you want to have that architecture standards.
I'm talking about it for the duplex.
You could do that as an option as well.
But we would think about that when it comes back, because right now we can't say.
Because if you didn't.
It's already zoned.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he has to come back and act.
No, it's already zoned for it.
So
It's already zoned, right, but again, we're saying that people won't park in those parking spaces because they're not allowed, but.
Yeah.
There's an architecture consideration there.
Yeah,
but they've been knocking the walls out since
February,
so.
Okay, let's stick to the.
what the
inside
I would caution trying to make a motion that limits it to a duplex. but adds
Exactly.
architecture standards because they can already do a
Exactly.
duplex today. Right. And that's not what this, I mean, you can limit the number of units between 2 and 5.
They're asking for 5. They already can do 2 now, so I don't think you can limit something, like you couldn't just slap architectural control and say, well, you're being multifamily, but you can do a duplex, but now you're gonna use architectural controls. Like, I think that's past the legality of being able to do that. But you could add a condition to the protective overlay that limits the number of dwelling inside between 2 and 5. Because they're asking for a zoning, it gives them 75.1 dwelling units an acre. They just plan to do 5. They technically could do more, but they could also do less. They're already allowed to do 2. You can essentially limit the density and put a specific dwelling unit number of no more than X number of dwelling units. I just don't think you can approve B, recommend approval of B, so you only can do a duplex and then put architectural control on it. Like that's.
And to clarify,
going too far.
I just wanted to go. The motion, the recommendation from staff is
Staff
approval.
recommendation was approval subject to protective overlay. You have the opportunity to accept staff recommendation. You can accept staff recommendation and modify the protective overlay, or you can have a motion for denial. Essentially, those are your 3 options.
So there is maybe a potential amendment on parking, that's about it too. I see there's a parking, one of your like rule number 3, I guess, that's something else that the DAP.
Well, that's essentially identifying where the parking has to be located to make sure that it's basically behind the structure.
Just clarify if that impacts anyone's motion, they can change. It's not.
The staff recommendation was 8 to 2, so there was 2 that denied it. I don't know, I think that's fair. I've been doing this, I think, for a year. Fairly uncommon that we don't, have a couple deny or it's, so, I don't know, I think we need to take that into consideration as well.
Do we usually ask? I
It
don't know that
is,
we ask.
well, we
usually do.
we
I
do
really
ask
do.
for a little
They do part
context,
of
but I
it.
do say the public feedback is substantially strong
Spaces are
for
handicapped
this
also.
compared to ones.
Yeah.
And we have in the past gone completely against the unanimous MPC vote. Really hinging on public feedback and not necessarily where some of the votes might even be fully on board with the denial or approval against MPC. It's more to be clear in communicating that there's a rift in agreement here to put that pressure on council in that communication.
I'm gonna move that we deny.
Second. There's been a motion and a second for denial. All in favor of denial, please raise your hand. All for denial.
In favor of denial. 7 to 1.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time and your note
Sorry, that is against the agreement.
and your thoughts.
Twilight.
Reach out to your council member.
Okay.
So without any objection, we'll join this meeting, right?
I'm not very political.
Okay.